G'day, you Nagashites. It is the coach here, and we are talking all things Soulblight Gravelords. Blah, 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 blah. It was actually funny because as I was starting to type up the script, I'm so like the description of the video, I'm so used to writing Legions of Nagash. I started typing it out. I'm like, no. This has changed a long time ago. You are no longer the Legions of Nagash. Nagash has taken a back seat. It's all about the vampires. But I'm here with Matt Kowalski.
Kowalyk.
Kowalyk. I went wrestling. We've been talking wrestling over in the internet for the last 10 minutes. So I just went to like wrestling default. It is Matt Kowalyk, straight out of Canada. And I know that you have been practicing pretty hard and doing pretty well with the old undead. And I'll get you to introduce yourself in a minute, but I guess the context of this video is I remember when like Levan was on the channel, and Levan did really well, a teammate of yours over in Canada. And, we're talking tactics, and, you and I were talking behind the scenes, and you had said, I'm running a very different list and getting a lot of success. So I thought I'd unpack it with you because, not everybody wants to throw 120 zombies at someone's face. Not everyone wants to paint and move, and it's a cool strategy. But what about the other side? What about the skellies? What about the grave guard? What about the blood knight? So I thought you can kind of give us a spin and take your perspective of the Soulblight Gravelords.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the beautiful thing about this book is it's pretty deep, right? So Levan runs it a completely drastically different way than I do, and he's had his successes. I've had mine. Obviously his claim to fame was the LVO, brought it out there because we've all kind of wanted to see it, but again, nobody really wanted to paint, as you said, nobody wants to paint up 120 zombies, right? But Levan killed it, and I'm stoked that he did really well, and he showed a different aspect to the book than what I've been running. So I've learned from him as I'm hoping he's learned from me. So.
Well, it's interesting because when the Soulblight Gravelords book dropped, everyone talked the theory that was zombies, right? And, everyone talked about the pile-ins and the mortal wounds and coming back, but very few people when third edition actually hit went out and ran the zombie lists. They ran the Grave Guard, they ran the Skellies. We started seeing like all Blood Knight list, like literally like a hero or, a Vordry or a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and then all the Blood Knights, right? We started seeing people play around with the Belladama and the Wolves, and you saw Chataka. And obviously the title of this episode is Mannfred Did Nothing Wrong. One, you should be very thankful of Mannfred, because without Mannfred, there was no Age of Sigmar. So
right.
any Mannfred haters out there, you got to thank him for Age of Sigmar, or you'd be on rank and flank moving around the board, like countercharging and leadership testing. Yeah, that's right.
Manny's the silent hand behind the scenes. Who cares about Nagash? It's all about Mannfred. So.
Yeah, it's all about the vampires. But look, it's such a great book. I spoke to Alex, on a show literally, just after third edition came out, and there's a lot of great lists. And I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about the Soulblight Gravelords versus Legions of Nagash, because I did play Legions of Nagash, is that in Legions of Nagash, it felt like it forced you down one build, and all of the bloodlines never really felt different. Like you could take almost the same list and put it in Grand Host of Nagash, Legion of Night, Legion of Blood, and there'd be minor differences at best. But I imagine, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the build construction between Castello and Blood and all of the, Avangorian are all different, and it really does incentivize you and allow you to create some tactically interesting but also competitive lists.
Yeah, no, honestly, so I haven't delved too much into Avangori because from what I've been reading, I'm sure there's something I haven't seen. To me, I would rather go Flesh Eater courts if I'm going to be running all the Terror guys running around. But I mean, you look at from Legion of Night even to Legion of Blood. Your Legion of Night is all about put nothing on the board. So you're basically playing Gene Stealer cults. Anybody who plays 40k that's in here, put nothing on the board except for a few heroes. Some of them are coming up from the grave site. Some of them are coming up board edge. But you don't know where they're coming from. And then, they have their turn one defense abilities and whatnot. And then you look at Legion of Blood, which, in my opinion, borderline probably, well, it is the tankier bloodline in the book, because if you have a vampire around any of your death rattle, you can't run them. They ignore negative modifiers, but you can positively modify them. So you're constantly having your Graveguard or your skeletons on a 4+ save regularly. So you're basically running Night Haunt that hit harder, really, if you think about it. Vikros, that's your casting. For the most part. And Levon runs Vikros with what he's doing, because I think that lends a little bit better into your foot heroes as well, because they are your casters. And then generally what I run, which is the Castelli. I've had some pretty good successes of them just running down the board, because everything I run for the most part is pretty quick. And you pop the command ability, and everything's got extra damage, and they kill stuff pretty quick. So I mean, you look at Vordry alone is an absolute animal in the game. But yeah, it's a good time. I mean, at Red Harvest this year, I was playing against my buddy Josh. He was running his Lumineth, and I tabled him turn 2 with this book. So when we get into what the Blood Knights can do in my lists, I'll explain kind of how that happened. But there's some tricky stuff with them. So Castelli's my jam, and yeah, and just what the person said there, it's probably one of the best designed written tome in the game. So context for me, I like to play a lot of techie armies, or deep armies, I would say. So I played Cities of Sigmar for years, right? And kind of got over it. And then Soulblight came out, and I was like, oh boy, this is basically that, but undead. So
Yes, that was what I wanted. Like when I played Legions of Night, at least, well, I actually played Legions of Night mostly in the Legions of Nagash, which was very confusing. LON. But when I played it, like I really enjoyed the techie piece as well. I love the counterplay style of armies, but I never really felt. Yeah, there was always some really interesting. Like I never felt I got the same type of tech as Cities. And I remember when I got the Soulblight book from Games Workshop, and I was looking at it, and obviously it was on the cusp of 3rd edition. So I actually didn't even release a video, just because I'm like, anything I say is on the cusp of 2nd going into 3rd. And what I say now might not actually be really true. And I think when we look at it, again, people were so upset, like, oh, this is not very good. You know, Soulblight Gravelords didn't really pique anyone's interest, and it never became the top army. But now in 3rd, we're starting to see people use it really well. And it does have a lot of tools to respond to the meta. And Blood Knights are great. It's been a long time since Blood Knights were great. But also, you're starting to see other art, like things like Direwolves and things like all these great little heroes just change the game so much. I remember playing Belladama, and I remember just being able to pull off that spell and being able to pull one model out of a bow snake army, right? And you turn that into a wolf. All of a sudden, you shut down Unleash Hell. There's so many cool little things like that I really wish I had when I was playing Legions of Nagash.
yeah, Belladama. Belladama is absolutely fantastic. I still think that there's a little bit of legs left in this book of some unknown. I think there's a lot in there. I truly don't think we see enough Legion of Blood.
Well, I've got a question for you coming up in a second.
All right, sweet.
But Legion of Night, even, I think, a lot of people go Castelli. That seems to be the most popular one. And I'm surprised in the current game with so much like alpha shooting right now, that more people aren't taking Legion of Night to put those heroes or these key troops like Graveguard. And yes, you've got the grave sites, but I always really enjoyed the flexibility of being able to put things into the grave site and having things come from the board edge. That I'm surprised we don't see more Legion of Night than there is in the game.
So with Castelli, we can essentially do the same thing, because Blood Knights come in on board edge like everything else in Legion of Night would. So the list that I've got in there, I can obviously showcase it, but I mean, a lot of them, you can bring the Blood Knights in board edge and be fine, and they are tanky enough to kind of chill around. And then you've got your big heroes. I'm a big hero guy. I'm not so much a foot slogger, but I think for the most part they should be tanky enough to survive. Or if I get first turn, there's enough shenanigans in there where I can get to you pretty quick. I mean, Amethystine Pinions is on either a Zombie Dragon or Vordry is absolutely insane. Or honestly, even Mannfred or Coven Throne. To get the cut, because Coven Throne also moves 14. Mannfred moves 16. So it's very easy to get your piece, the one piece that you need to be somewhere with that spell. It's very easy to get it to where it needs to be. So
funny you mention actually the Coven Throne, because that's probably the one. There's a few models that you don't see very often. At least when I look at second edition versus third edition lists, one of the things that seems to get cut is those wizard wagons, the Palanquin, the Coven Throne, and the Mortis Engine.
Yeah,
all three of them, like, you rarely see them anymore. I don't know if you got any thoughts on why. And I feel like, at least when I talk to people, it's like I'm always over points, and it's the first thing that gets cut.
I think that with more specifically with your Mortis Engine and the Palanquin, I don't think they offer the utility for my opinion. Again, this book is so crazy that I could very well be wrong. I mean, the Mortis Engine dishes out a crap load of mortal wounds. It really does, and it's fairly cheap. But for me, the Coven Throne, it went down in points, which was also really good. It did get cut out of my list, and then it went back down in points, so it kind of snuck its way back in. But what for me the Coven Throne is, especially in Castello, it's a big base, and you make it your general. So then you have Rousing Commander, which from that big base, you've got all that. Don't speak about. All right, I know why you hate it. I'll get into that.
Yuri from Team Canada as well.
Yeah.
Like
I'll get into that in a sec. But it's very good against destruction monsters, and I'll tell you why in a sec. So it's a big base. The Rousing Commander ability is now a bigger aura. So I mean, you're getting that buff off where you're getting the extra damage, and things count as an extra wound. Actually, you know what? Honestly, the Coven Throne is a Castello vampire, so it also benefits from the thing as well. And it's got enough attacks in there where those 1 damage attacks are now becoming 2 damage attacks. So the poignards are the poniards are, I believe it's full profile, 8 attacks, no rend, but I mean 2 damage apiece. So I mean those will add up. And then the thing that is almost an auto include for me is the command ability. It's +1 hit, wound, and save. So then you put that on Vordry, which means you don't have to cast Vordry's spell on himself. So that opens up to you're able to always cast Amethystine Pinions and get Vordry anywhere on the board where he needs to be, because then he moves 20 inches. And against low bravery armies, that spell that the War Scroll spell that the Coven Throne has, I mean, you cast it, and it's a low cast value. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's a 6. And then you pick a unit. You roll 3d6. You beat its bravery. That unit can't target the Coven Throne in attack. But if I constantly tie up that unit with low bravery with my Coven Throne, that unit will never be able to attack if I keep getting the spell off and I keep beating the bravery. This is why Yuri hates it, because it's quite good against Gargants. So
I run a lot of low bravery armies: Cities of Sigmar, Gloomspite Kids, Gargants. Like, I hate Lumineth, and I hate anything that has a go at my bravery. Just a quick clarification, and the Lich King is actually spot on with this. Legion of Blood ignores modifiers on hit and wound rolls, not on the save roll. So I just quickly looked up the rules, and favorite retainer is ignore negative modifiers to hit and wound for melee.
Still makes him
obviously
good.
Death Rattle. Yeah, it's still great, but I think just anyone who might think about that. But there was a good question I said I would go back to in a second. It was from Chewin asking, did the Tome Celestial change the way that you look at like Legion of Blood? Because White Dwarf did release an update, and there are some rules, and we'll get to the rules in a minute. I want Matt's kind of perspective on the rules, and you've got a lot to build around, even just from an allegiance point of view, let alone a sub-allegiance. But everybody did get a few extra little benefits from the White Dwarf. And then it seemed like they gave a whole bunch of love to the Legion of Blood in addition, which I thought was really odd. I thought, Legion of Blood and, like I said, Avangorian and even Legion of Night could have given some benefit. But, did those White Dwarf rules give you any additional excitement? So like one of them was the unparalleled expertise, so you can make your vampires either more combaty or more magic-y, and it gives you a bunch of boosts.
Yeah. I mean, it plays into you can actually play it as whatever kind of style you want. So if you love your magic, you have have a reason to maybe actually think about Legion of Blood. And then you're more combat-y, right? It means that you can take your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon and not take 4 dry, and he's almost as combat-y. I mean, nothing will ever be as combat-y as 4 dry in that list or in the book, but it gives you the reason, and then you can save a couple points, and it benefits from Legion ability. So
Yes, yeah, the other ability, right? Because you can, so for anyone who doesn't know the rule, if each of your vampire lords, you can either make martial or arcane. If you make it martial, it's +1 attack for monster vampires, so your vampire lord on zombie dragon, or if it's on foot, it would be +2 attacks, which combines really nicely with deadly coordination, where you basically double fight with a hero and like a troop, right, or something. I can't remember exactly the rule. Or if you take the wizardy side, again, you get +1 to cast if it's a monster vampire, or it'll be +2 to the cast if it's a foot vampire. So does really give you a lot more durability from your hero versus like a necromancer and things like that.
yeah, I think it just it opens up Legion of Blood to a little bit more play style than just you can't modify my stuff, which is really kind of what it was to me. But I mean, it gives you more reason to take a little bit more vampires to make your death rattle slightly better, right? So I'll probably still never run Black Knights ever, but I don't
Poor
think
old
they're.
Blood Knights, they not Black Knights, sorry. Black Knights seem to be the other poor cousin here. Is like, I remember when like there'd be 15 Blood Knights and you spend a CP and you bring them back, and it just like would grind my gears.
So all right, I know we all harp on them a little bit too much. I think if you have the points, they have a place because they're only 100 points right now. And you know what? Honestly, it's a thing where it's not terribly bad because they are fairly quick. They're cavalry, and if they make their charge, they're doing D3 mortal wounds. It's not a bad thing to have if you have a few points kicking around and you don't know what to spend them on, and you need something quick. There's nothing wrong. I mean, look at Lumineth, right? Now you're starting to see that one random unit of Dawn Riders in there because that's just how the points are working out. But they're quick. They can tag objectives. They can do things for you for the points. But I mean, if you got 100 points, you're looking at what is it? A 10-inch cavalry, 10 wounds, doing mortal wounds on the charge. It's fine for 100 points. I just think there's better things to spend some points on. Corpse Cart, for example. But
And hey, they're as well also blood battle line in Legion of Blood as well.
yep.
So look, let's elevate the conversation. Just step back for a second.
Sure.
What are they good at? Like, if I'm going to play Soulblight, what are you good at, especially when you think about the meta right now?
So it's crazy. So like and this is just it has nothing to do with the army. This is just the book. I think you can. It plays into a lot of different play styles where you can make the switch to it, and people are going to enjoy playing it. And truthfully, the way I see it, if you're enjoying playing an army, you're going to want to learn a little bit more about it and play it better. If you're having fun with it, so if you can find something that fits your play style, you're going to kill it, right? My play style is not 120 zombies, but Levon enjoyed playing it, and he killed it. He's kicking ass. But there's so many different things in this book that. So I mean, case in point, the bringing back summonable is insane. It's quite good. I mean, the zombies on it
When it works. I played a
when it
game
works.
a few weeks ago, and my poor opponent couldn't bring back a single unit. He rolled like nothing but the worst rolls.
I've definitely had that. But I mean, when you're running 60s of something in an army, hey, I know that guy. Yeah, Josh Akins. That was Yuri had to point out the guy that I tabled and turned to. But but eh, zombies are one of the few battle line I think other than some gits or grots where your initial block before you even reinforce it, it's 20 models. and it's only
Mm.
115 points. So I think it's with this book, it's very easy to have a horde of something, but also fill out pieces with so like for me, for example, I could fill out my pieces with my big super hitty guys, and then so my zombies aren't my hammer, whereas they are with Levon. Mine are more of an anvil tar pit, tie you up with 40 wounds. They have the 6-up save or 6-up ward. Sorry, if I happen to start killing some 1 wound models out there because they have the mortal wound, it's a pretty cheap tar pit.
Mm.
And I think that's what this army is very good at, as a like your first step is finding your tar pit, and then letting your other pieces kind of pick up the slack. So for me, I generally run a block of 40 zombies, and I hold on to an objective, or I auto run them up to their 10 inches, and then I pile in 16, and then I happen to get on a shooting unit potentially, and they can't unleash hell on me. Now, with unleash hell being, nerfed a little bit, it's not as crazy, but it's good. It's a very tanky, tar pity army. Is
Yeah.
long story short is what I'm trying to get at, because you look at your anything vampire keyword other than I believe Ratty and Belladama, they're 3+ save. Your Blood Knights are a 3+ save. Vordry 3+ save with healing as you kill if you kill a model, you get D3 wounds back. Vordry's got once per battle D6 back. And it's just, if you don't kill an outright unit, then I'm bringing back D3 models, and then they have a spell to do that. Emerald Life
Do some of
Swarm
the
can bring stuff
do
back.
the heroes still heal? Like does like Mannfred and Neferata heal a wounded turn if they kill something? I can't remember if they've still got the rule.
Yes. Let me. So I've
That's
got
right.
it right
No,
here.
I can bring it up. You keep talking, but I think the point that you're making
Yep.
here is that the army is durable. You have some really good armor saves if you want to go down that path, but you also can go down a big tar pit of wounds. And from what I've seen, both from yourself and other players, it doesn't have to be zombies. If you're someone listening to this going, I don't want to play zombies, I don't like the models, I don't want to move around a blob of 60, that's cool. You can still do, if you want to do something that's durable, you've got your skeletons. You can do dire wolves. You can do Graveguard. And I've seen some really good lists where they've gone 2 blocks of 20 or, well, yeah, two blocks of 20 Graveguard. If you want to just do a more durable, tanky kind of, cavalry army, you can do multiple units of black blood knights, not black knights, blood knights. Or you can go down and have multiple vampire lord zombie dragon with Vordry. So there's a lot of durability. There's just flexibility on where you pull it from. It's not like there's only one option. Like in Cities of Sigmar, if I want durability, I've got to go Phoenix Guard. It's my one and only real option.
I don't hate on Phoenix Guard one bit. I love them. But yeah.
No, but like if most of my army in cities, right? If most of my army is free guild, I'm not going to be able to synergize very well. Or I've got to pull out other points in order to synergize, like the Anointed on foot, in order to benefit this unit. But at least all of your army is going to synergize in the Soulblight.
Yeah, so I think that's the really cool thing about this book, is it almost seems like almost anything in this book has a place in any list, in my opinion. Obviously, this is all kind of neither here or there, but in my opinion, I feel like anything has a list, or a point in the list. So I can sub out my 40 zombies for what you said, like Graveguard. Or I can bring a block of Death Rattle skeletons, which honestly, those things are kind of insane, because how they bring back models is on their combat. You roll a dice for each one of them that are dead, and then on a 4+, they're coming back. So you're getting 50% on average, you're getting 50% of your losses back. And then if you have a necromancer that gets off Van Hels, you're getting 75% of your losses back. So it almost forces you. Well, it does. It truly does. It forces you to kill the whole unit outright, especially with zombies or anything like that. It forces you to kill them, because that army or that unit can very quickly get up to a decent amount of strength where they're going to be an issue again. But then the thing that sucks about it is, if you do get that 5+ or 4, depending on what happens, if you get that roll off, well, that unit just comes back anyways. So
Yes. And one of the things that I love about the undead is it punishes players who love to split their attacks. Because as a player, right, there's always this point in time where I'm like, right, there's a good chance I'm going to overkill these direwolves, skeletons. If I don't, if I do, I'm going to waste all these attacks. All about efficiency, right? So I'm going to split my attacks. I'm going to put part of them here and then put most of them here. And if you don't get that right, you fail massively because you leave that one or two zombie or skeleton, whatever it is, on the table, and then you just grow them back. You grow them back, and it's a wonderful but frustrating. Do I overkill, or do I risk underkilling this unit and get punished for it?
Yep. And that's where a cheeky thing of depending on where you pull units from, or again you have that one skeleton left, and it has a round of combat. Well, that I'm now rolling 19, depending on the unit size. But if you bring a block of 20, and you have Team Canada is just ripping into each other.
Don't worry about them. They're shit talking in the chat. Team Canada's on fire.
But you have that one skeleton back, and it happens to have a round of combat left because you didn't kill off the unit. And now I'm rolling 19 dice, and I'm getting 9, potentially 10 of them back, and that's an issue. Or you can do a cheeky retreat and then start chipping away or chipping back into the D3 coming back, or rally. You could spike a rally. I mean, with 60 zombies, you kill 40 of them. I'm rolling 40 dice. I'm getting zombies back, and then I'm guaranteed to at least get back another D3. So you have to overkill them. You really do, because they're going to surprise you how fast they come back. They really will.
Yeah, they definitely punish you if you don't plan out your attack appropriately. So I'm going to bring up the rules in a minute because I'd love your perspective as a player, because you have a lot of rules. Normally, I can put your rules on a single page and we talk about it. I've got 2 sets of rules for your use for your allegiance and your sub-allegiance alone, right? But we talked what you're good at, right? You got flexibility, your durability, and all that good stuff, right? What aren't you good at? If I'm going in and playing a Soulblight Gravelords and I'm taking it to a tournament, what are my weaknesses, or what are the things that I need to consider in order to protect myself? Like, what are those things that you've noticed?
We have no shooting, or we have crap shooting, or low range shooting, I should say. I mean, our best shooting attack is Vordryer, the zombie dragon, and that's 9 inches or something like that. I mean, it's D6 wounds or D6 damage, but we have no shooting, so we are a strictly, for the most part, we're a combat army. So you've got to play it tactically enough where you need to get in on your opponent's shooting in a way where you're going to mitigate your losses, because you have no way of whittling down your opponent's shooting at range. We don't have much or any, very little damage dealing spells as well. So our range damage is minimal at best. But we do have good spells. It's just we don't have the range damage. We just don't. So you got to be really mindful about what you're going into and how you're doing it.
So how does that play out? I wasn't going to play in this question, but I want to double down that for a second, because right now, in the current state of the game, we are being dominated by shooting, whether it is long strikes, bow snakes, cruel boys, lots of things. I can rattle a list of, the shooters, right? One of the things that you need to be able to do is reach out and touch them, because they've normally got a solid screen protecting them, right? So how on earth do you handle them and without the offensive magic, right? Because normally you'd use movement to get into them, which is again why I mentioned maybe Legion of Night. You would use spell casting to do damage from range. You would use long range shooting, which we know you don't have. So is that an auto loss if I come up against Lumineth with their Sentinels, their long strikes with the the mortal wounds and the double tapping with the Holy Command once per game?
No, it's tough, but I mean that's where you use your zombies. If you have the ability to use that 16-inch threat range of just being able to pile in, and then you tie up that shooting, fantastic. It works out that way. With the nerf to Unleash Hell, it's all about where you charge those the shooting. And honestly, you really got to think tactically now of how you use your grave sites. For Graveguards, for example, no way in hell I'm putting them on the board. I'm gonna have to bring them up from a grave site and then move them in while the shooting's tied up with something, and that's where Blood Knights I think are for my list. That's where Blood Knights are good, is because they do have a decent amount of wounds. They are tanky, where I could survive some of the shooting. But realistically, you're going to have to potentially sacrifice something to eat the Unleash Hell, and then you move in because they've already used their Unleash Hell. That's where you charge in your secondary charges. But honestly, that might be where you take a random unit of 10 skeletons or the 100-point Black Knights, right? I don't care if my Black Knights die. They can eat the Unleash Hell and go with it. But sadly, the shooting wise, that's just going to happen against you. It's honestly it's what you keep in reserves and how you deploy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a way where you can deploy far enough away. I've seen played against where Gargants just kind of deployed way in the back corner and just out of range. But we have the movement that can actually help that, right? And we have the bringing stuff in on reserves where, sure, you can go first. You could try to get your shooting off, or I can use a reserve somewhere off from a gravesite or board edge, and then potentially tie up your shooting guys because they're generally not great in combat.
Do you have any advice for me from a gravesite perspective? Because I noticed that's one thing that, look, deployment for the average person is always a question like, how do I deploy the most effectively, right? And games can be won and lost purely on deployment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of questions coming from Team Canada I will bring up in a second. I don't know if they're shit posting you or if they're legitimate questions, but I'll bring them up in a second. But before I get into that, I want to ask you, do you have any advice for me when it comes to the grave sites? Do you have a strategy around being offensive, defensive? I remember when I used to play Soulblight or Legions, I'd have a distance between the deployment zone, right? I'd always measure out, I think it was about 12 inches away from the deployment zone of my
Mm-hmm.
opponent, so that, I would always, it was hard for my opponent to block off the radius of the grave site. I had a couple of plans and just things that I pull out. Do you have any theory or places that you'd put your grave sites?
So again, it depends on multiple different things, right? It depends on your scenario. It depends. I mean, but if you want to go easy and you're just beginner and you're having a fun game, there's a way where you can deploy your grave sites using the 12-inch aura around them, where you will always have your deathless minions, even if there's no hero around them. But I mean, there's always that benefit of having the one grave site in your opponent's territory, where they always have to be thinking about it. They'll have to pull something away from it to screen that out. So.
Do you put them
Um,
more in your opponent's territory, your territory, the center, the
I
flanks?
I
Again,
try
like I
yeah.
know,
Yeah,
I
I
know
try
different opponents.
yeah, I try to do I, I definitely do a lot in no man's land. A lot of stuff just happens there. So middle of
Flanks,
the
is that
board. Yep,
flanks?
flanks. Yeah, middle of the board. Um I like to have one in my deployment, and I like to have one in my opponent's deployment. Again, just to get them thinking about something in the back. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing four corners either, and that way you're increasing your range to always have deathless minions, where you don't always have to have a hero babysitting your giant tar pit of zombies to keep the deathless. You'll have a gravesite nearby. So, and then the gravesite also helps with healing, bringing stuff back, yada yada yada. But I personally like to at least sneak one kind of in my opponent's territory to make them think about it. Until I bring all of my reserves in, they're always thinking about that gravesite, and even then, they're always going to be thinking about it if I spike that 5+. So it's always got to be in their mind.
Yeah, it always really, like, when you sit down to deploy, and I know it's going to be different, right? When you got a alpha strike or a very fast army coming at you, where the battle takes place is going to be very different to a army that wants to castle up in the back and just shoot you from range, right? So I appreciate that everything, and this is kind of what I want to get out of you, because yes, it is going to be different. But if I'm a Soulblight player looking for some advice, I'm thinking about where the battle's going to take place, and it's not putting about them all aggressively, all defensively. Don't put them all in the center. Think about where it could be, but having some things on the flanks where your bubbles overlap,
Yep.
or you've got very generous. I love the psychological element. I always used to have at least one that was quite aggressive as a gravesite, and I never normally had a plan to use it, but it was the psychological. I could bring something up, steal this objective. I could easily get into X, and the opponent would either never leave it alone, and they would always like guard it, and that's just one less thing in combat. Or if they left it alone and there was an opportunity to do something, I'd pull it up.
But I mean, it's the same thing. So in my local area, we got a Skaven player, a couple of Skaven players, where I've played enough against the null holes to know that I got to pay attention to that. Yeah, definitely Team Canada's talking a lot of crap to Josh.
It's
Sorry,
like
Josh. but the null hole that's always in your back territory, you got to think about it now. You can smash it now, but in second edition, you couldn't. So I mean, all of a sudden 9 Storm Fiends are behind you, and honestly, when 9 Storm Fiends look at something and they're all in range, they're gonna kill it. So you got to think about it, because something that you don't want to get behind you can very easily get behind you with just by using a gravesite. And the beauty about the gravesites is it's not a terrain feature; it's a token, so you can't smash it. So you have to screen it out.
100%. You can't smash it to rubble. You can't do anything. Do you have, Josh asking a good question, do you have any advice for grave sites? Do you have something like, have you converted something from, I don't know, the Sigmarite Mausoleum? Have you got a flat token? How do you represent the grave site? Because it is just a point on the battlefield. It's not actually anything.
Yeah, so I have some poker chips that I've just kind of spray painted to kind of look like a gray site. Truthfully, just for the sake of just your gameplay and the ease of gameplay, you should always have something flat, in my opinion, because that way you're not moving around your token of like a grave that's sticking up, because you can put stuff on top of it and it won't be affected. So I mean, just for the ease and flow of the game, and to know that your grave site's always going to be there, have something flat, have a flat token. Yeah, 100%.
I use two things actually. I've converted up some 50 mil bases that look like grave sites,
Mhm.
but I've also got some flat tokens. So what I'll always do is put the flat token first, then I'll put my little aesthetic type token. And if it ever gets contested, someone wants to get on top of it, I can easily remove it,
Yep.
and there's still the flat clear token. So
Yeah, as long
but I
as you
think
have as long as you have that flat token that's underneath where your gravesite will always stay where you've put it, then you're golden. I mean, the way you're doing it is cool thematically, and then honestly, something that's sticking up from the board, it is also easier for your opponent and yourself to see where they are.
yeah.
But definitely have something flat for ease of game.
Yeah, those tokens are really helpful. And maybe one burning question, and I'm going to get to the rules in a second. I really do want you to give me your advice on your rules. But this is a question that comes up a lot, because a lot of talking heads are talking about one drops, right? It's the race to the bottom. It's either you are one drop or two drop, as low as you can possibly be, or you don't give a rat's and you just have a million drops, whatever you need to be. How important for you is the battle regiment and the one drop? Is it a game that you're chasing?
So I generally don't, because I'm still in the mindset of cities where I never have a one drop ever, except for my living cities list. So I've kind of been I'm used to not playing the one drop and deploying in a way that I don't need it, because honestly I think there's a lot in there where there are some artifacts that you would like to have on top of your arcane tome. And also, you'll see in one of my lists that I went for Warlord, where the extra enhancement that I had was the spells, because I'm not running a Necromancer, but I'm running Mannfred, who can run the lore of Necromancer. And there's 2 spells in there that are absolutely fantastic, especially if you spike the 9+. And we'll get into that one.
Yeah, well, I'm going to bring up the rules now, because
Yep.
I think Team Canada is asking lots of good questions, but we will eventually get to like 2 hour mark and actually not actually talked about the rules. So I've got the rules up here, and I thought it'd be easier to do it this way than other ways. I normally have it a little bit bigger, but there's a lot of rules that you've got. You've got the like there's just so many rules, right? Like when you look at Soulblight Gravelords, what are the rules at an allegiance level that is most important to you?
So obviously the one that's super important to me, I mean, Deathless Minions is good. I mean, always having a ward save is fantastic. Honestly, when Nagash lost it, it really hurt him, not having the Deathless Minions. And it shows that, I mean, that 6-up ward save is quite good, especially on zombies where you have no save. The Locus of Shyish is good. Now you have to pay attention of what you can do with it. It's only lore of vampire and only lore of death mages. So sadly, the Belladonna spell where you can bring back a wolf, it can't resolve twice. But there are some great spells, and specifically the ones in lore of death mage that if you resolve twice, you can actually double down on it on the same unit. One of them, for example, is subtract attack characteristic. That's one of the ones that you can buff or debuff more than once, I believe. Same thing with your it's not your armor save, but and then your hits or whatever, but damage as well. You can really nerf something down with damage, even if you spread it onto 2 units. -1 to damage is great on that. So I love that. I mean, honestly, reanimated horrors, I'm just going to kind of go down the list, but I mean, subtracting anything from bravery, if your opponent really is worried about things running, they're always going to have a command point to inspire anyways. So they should be fine. So
Yeah, like
I don't play into that.
reanimated horrors is not something, because I guess part of what I want to get out of you, right, is that I look at reanimated horrors and go, right, I'm going to subtract 1 to the bravery. Cool, I'm going to double down on that, and I'm going to find an endless spell that creates another modifier to bravery, and I'm going to try to force people to take bravery tests. And now that the game only allows you to do 1 inspiring presence per battle round or per turn, I'm gonna force it, a massive panic attack and run off the board, right? That's an idea.
Yeah.
Is it actually worth exploring in theory and kind of get multiple modifiers in order to make people run?
No, I mean it's all pretty situational. And again, it's always the one that you want to run. They'll spend the command point to keep them around. And truthfully, if I'm running a boatload of zombies, I kind of want your 1 wound models to stick around so I can turn them into zombies anyways. So it's not a big deal. I wouldn't play into it too much. Truthfully, again, I mean people are just gonna save their command points if they're cognizant of it. So yeah. Deadly Coordination, I don't play into it too much. I know Levon does, but there's very few foot or there's very few not monster vampires or heroes in the book that that you want to be in combat. So it's almost irrelevant for me.
I imagine that is really for your vampire on. If you run a unit of Graveguard and you got either a vampire lord on foot or a White King, usually supporting them for like what +1 attack from the vampire lord on foot, or is it
Yep.
+1 to hit? Or I can't remember what the White King does. I imagine it's that situation that I might want to use Deadly Coordination. Outside of that, probably not.
Yeah, so the White King, you reroll hit rolls of 1 for your death
Yes.
rattle. But I mean, to me, it's a bonus. It's not something that I would play into. It's cool. It's kind of Lumineth-y, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. But again, it's not something that I generally play into because Levon's absolutely correct. I mean, yeah, you have the White King would be really the only one that I would probably put into combat where it'd be relevant. Truthfully, as much as it pains me to say it, after playing him enough and seeing Levon playing him enough, Chadgar, he's not great. He's nothing really special. His biggest thing is he brings a unit of dire wolves with him. I'd rather just drop Rajkar and bring a unit of dire wolves, to be honest with you, and then fill out the points with something else. So it's a bonus, but it's not.
You're not building around it.
It's not something to build around. No, definitely not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, a lot of your minor heroes are really support pieces. Your Necromancer, your White King, your Vampire Lord on foot, all of those little things are there to be support
Yep.
pieces. If you want damage, you're looking at your monster heroes. You're
Yeah, I
looking at
mean,
your
yeah, if you have your Necromancer in close combat, you got another problem. So, yeah,
that's your last resort.
yeah.
When one question I've got for you about grave sites before I move to the other set of rules is is it the Chris Rock theory? No, is it the Eddie Murphy? I can't remember the exact comedy show. And it's like, I can drive with my feet. It doesn't make it a good idea. And just because I can put things into the grave site doesn't make it a good idea. So do you always put things into grave sites? How often you put things into grave sites? Or are you like me where I will hold off some of my summonable units and mess with an opponent because they try to deploy thinking I'm going to, but I actually don't?
I mean, again, it's pretty situational as well, right? I mean, there's always a benefit of having something in reserve because your opponent has to think, especially with the units that are coming from the grave sites. It's not going to be just 10, right? I mean, it's going to be a sizable unit coming up from those. So it's something that you really got to be thinking about. Is it something that's a necessity? No. I mean, the benefit of if you're against a shooting army, you put things in the gravesite or in reserves to not get shot off the board, and you bring them in, and then you hope for the charge. But I mean, yeah, I mean, a big giant block of zombies. Why would you put them in the gravesite? Um, there's something that's on the board that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with them quickly. Um, Now, a giant block of 60 zombies coming in from reserves, that's a little bit easier to screen out because it's a big piece of real estate that you can screen out. Because I mean, you're only working with a holy within 12, and a giant block of 60 zombies is hard to fit in that, especially when somebody's trying to zone you out of that.
Yeah, and I remember playing a game recently where I had my Mega Gargants on the on the aggressive attack, right, and I had them in ranges of your gravesite bubble, and when you put something into summonable, and my opponent at the time was challenged to go, well, do I bring a big block of, let's say, zombies? Do I bring them out because you've got restriction? You've got to be outside of, is it 9 of your opponent?
Yeah, it's just like
So
any other deep striking. Yeah.
yeah, so the challenge there is that with if I've got a model on or near your objective or your gravesite, it means you might not be able to bring out your maximum amount of the models. So do you A, have to delay a turn, or B, do you bring up a half strength or whatever it might be? So again, I think it's a good question to ask yourself is, do I put it in at what point? What's good? Is it a low model count? Is it like 10 dire wolves? Is it a bat swarm summonable these days?
Yes.
The fell bats.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it really, again, it depends on the situation. Do I want it to get shot off the board turn one? No, then put it in the, if you can put it in the gravesite, then you run that risk of it never potentially not coming up full strength. But honestly, I see a more benefit of bringing up your graveguard from a gravesite. Because they can definitely easily be shot off the board, and truthfully, they should be taken off the board as fast as you can. Because even if you leave 5 of them alive, they will hurt you,
yeah.
and then you can bring them back. But I mean, if you have a giant block of 60 zombies, nah, like they shouldn't be shot off the board turn one. They just shouldn't, and then you could just start bringing them back. So
No, I dig it. I agree. Anything else you want to talk about with these set of rules, or should we go for the second set?
no, I think this page specifically, a lot of it is just kind of you don't build around it. It's more of a bonus kind of a thing. But I mean, the huge one is Deathless Minions. You don't have to build around it because you have it. So, Locust and Deathless are two fantastic rules. The other ones are just kind of like if they happen, they happen.
Yeah, I think the difference, well, is Locust is now modifiable, right? Where previously in Legions it was an unmodified 9 plus or 10 it was. Now you can modify it, right? It's just a 9 up.
It just says 9 plus. Let me double check though. I've always kind of played it as a because we don't have too much modifier for casting anyways. To be honest with you, unless
No,
you're
but if you got like an
Intelli.
arcane piece of terrain, for example,
Yep.
like boom, you got yourself an 8 plus.
No, sorry, it's non-modified. It's unmodified.
It's unmodified. Cool.
Yep.
I didn't remember dropping from that. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah, I was gonna say you had me thinking there for a second, but no,
Poor
yeah, it is.
McGash just be like doing 6-up double spellcasting.
And I thought, well, yeah, he
You
can
got
do that.
+3, right? Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, and obviously, the corpse cut and things like that too. You got your other set of rules, which is obviously your Deathless Invocation, your your Endless Legions, your Might of the Crimson Keep, and Shifting Keep. And two of those obviously are your sub allegiance for Castelli, which in a minute we're actually going to show off two of your lists. So the reason why Castelli rules there is because obviously that's the context of what we're going to show off. So
Yeah, I mean, Deathly Invocation is just it's just fantastic. Period. Again, it's not something that you need to build around, because if you have heroes in your army, it's going to happen, and generally you're going to have more than one of these things, because there are no heroes that aren't one of these things. So I mean, that's just things that it just brings back D3 wounds allocated to a summonable unit, and other than bats and dire wolves, you're just bringing back D3 bases. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't see. Yeah.
are you thinking about single wound models with this? Are you thinking about multi-wound? Because I guess the challenge with direwolves having with 2 wounds apiece, or it can be quite hard to bring things back.
I mean, yeah, I mean, but it's on a 3+. You're getting 1 base back. Again, there's nothing wrong with getting a full base of something back. It's definitely it benefits your 1 moon models, period. I mean,
Yeah.
but again, the bonus is it's going to happen anyways. So you try to roll it for the wolves, and if it happens, it happens, and it's fantastic, because then you now have a 2 wound wolf with 5-up save and a 6-up ward back that they have to deal with. And that's going back to my previous point, where summonable units in this army, if you don't kill them off outright, they can come back to a decent strength fairly quickly. So
does that mean summonable units have more value to you than unsummonable units? Just thinking about, again, the gravesite stuff, the regeneration stuff, a lot of these things are keyworded or locked to summonable. Does that play anything to your list building?
So I generally try to have a block of something, like a giant block of zombies, skeletons, or graveguard, and they're summonable. So that just kind of works out that the things that I want to have a big block of something of are summonable, right? So yeah, I mean, I truthfully, just the real estate that you can have, the amount of wounds that you can have for the amount of points that you can have, or that you have to spend, it's always coming. Sorry, it's always coming from a summonable unit, and I think you should always have at least 1 giant unit of them, or a couple units of them, because again, there's always that chance of you spike to 5+ or 4+, or whatever, depending on how many units you kill. Then that unit's coming back half strength, and it's like, oh shit, I now have to deal with it. It's always something that's got to be on your opponent's mind, because you spike it, half the units coming back, either 30 zombies or 15 skeletons, 10 graveguard, because 10 graveguard are going to hurt you. So yeah, and
Ramon's made the exact point that I wanted to I'm just trying to get you to explain about, if I'm at a decision point and I'm like, right, I want some cavalry, and I either got A, Black Knights, B, Blood Knights, one of them summonable, one is not of them. Does being summonable make one more attractive than running over Blood Knights, right? Just, and obviously the armor save, and there's other things that kind of make Blood Knights more appealing. But would that summonable keyword go, oh, actually, wait a second. When I think about it, I'm running a Mortark, I'm running a bunch of like X, Y, and Z. Now I've got, some summonable cavalry that could be better than Blood Knight.
No, for that example specifically, no. Blood Knights are just hands down way better. I mean, you got the wound sink, so generally the things that aren't summonable, they're much harder to kill. So it kind of goes hand in hand of you look at the stats and how you buff them, as opposed to playing into the Deathly Invocation. Again, I mean, your Necromancer and your Vampire Lord on foot, that gives the extra attack, that only plays into summonable units. So if you're running a couple of those guys, then you probably should have at least 1 summonable unit that you can benefit from, right? So.
Yeah. What about Endless Legion? How do you think about Endless Legion in regards to bringing back that destroyed, again, summonable unit?
It's great. I mean, anything that can bring back a unit on a roll. I mean, yeah, it's a roll, so chances does it happen? It doesn't always happen. If it does, it's fantastic. But the thing that's great about, especially the list that I've got in there, is there are units in those lists that can very easily kill a unit of something, and then you buff that plus, so that your roll is now +1, right? So +1 or +4, 4 plus, 3 plus. You can reliably kind of get to that point with a heavy hitting army. Um, so again, I mean, it's definitely a bonus because being always being able to bring something back or summon things in the game, uh, it just maximizes your points, right? So having a 2,000 point army with endless legions there, I mean, there's a chance depending on what you're bringing back. But what you do bring back, I mean, you're then bringing back more points than what you have put into the army. So I mean, and then they have to spend resources to kill him again. So
Yeah. Levine actually asked a really good question because I don't see a lot of this unit on the table. Probably something that I probably know why I didn't run them. They kind of frustrated the hell out of me. But Vargeist seem to be something that not a lot of people run. And they've got an interesting rule with the fact that they are a null deploy. So instead of putting them on the table, they can be basically flying in the sky and you drop them down, very similar to a summonable unit. Do you have any thoughts on Vargeist in Legions? Sorry, in Soulblight in general?
I think they're fantastic in Legion of Blood. Or sorry, Legion of Night. So many legions, guys. But
Because they're battle
Legion,
line.
yeah, because they're battle line, right? And anything that you can pick up that battle line spot and then potentially bring in a couple of elite units in there, they're fantastic. They have a boatload of attacks, and again, the deep striking is good in them. Uh, their save isn't great, so it's I mean, it's a terrible example to kind of compare them to, but it's almost like the Fulminator thing, right? Where if they get into combat and don't kill what they kill, that's going to kill your
They're
Vargeist.
a they're a glass cannon. Yes,
Yep.
100%. They are not fulminators. People do not go on the internet right now and go
Yeah, don't
order
do that.
like 5 boxes of Vargeist. Please don't,
No.
because they hit on threes, wound on threes. They're exploding sixes, so you get an extra attack if you roll a 6 to hit. But they're only Ren 1 for 2 damage, 5 up armor save with a 4 wounds apiece. They are, and when I ran Legion of Night, one of my challenges when they come in from 9 and they don't hit the charge, how do I guarantee that charge? And I know from my time, again, this is Legion of Night from the old book, I ended up swapping out Vargeist for Morghast Harbingers for the 3d6 charge, which now unfortunately is no longer in your book. It's an Ossiarch model. But I found that if I want to guarantee that charge, I'm going to need to babysit them, something that can re-roll the charge, something can give them a boost. They could be quite good to kind of steal home objectives, score battle tactics, like, being in the opponent's territory and things like
Yep.
that. But I probably wouldn't overinvest in old Vargeist.
No, I mean at 155 points, that can die that quick. Again, it's one of those things that if they don't get in, if they don't kill what they get in on, they're in for a hard time. And sadly, it's one of the few, if on the top of my head, I think it might be the only vampire unit with vampire keyword that doesn't benefit from the hunger, where if they kill a model, they don't get D3 wounds back.
No, they don't. No, their only rule is the exploding sixes. They can fly. They do have a champion, which is good because that means they can re-roll their own charge. And they've got the deathly descent. So sorry, that's the flying and kind of drop down outside of 9 inches, and they have to be down by the 4th battle round. So
Yep.
no, they
But
don't have the hunger.
yeah, but I would almost say, I mean, the deep strike's all well and good to maybe tag a couple back objectives on them, but I mean, if you hide them behind things, line of sight, if you're not against sentinels, um, uh, they're fast enough where they can get to where they need to be to potentially make that charge not a 9+, right? So I mean, they're 12-inch with fly, so I mean, they can scoot up the board pretty quick. So.
I was going to ask you, like, would they be a good option to, if more and more people are going, again, long strikes, bow snakes, just shooty mortal wound, and you don't want them popping wounds into, again, your Blood Knights, your Vampire Lord, your Mannfred, all those things. Would they be a good option maybe to come down and get into those shooty units, or do you think there's too much at risk?
I think that's too many points to do that with. It's 155 points. When you have Fellbats that are 75 points, 14-inch move.
That's exactly what I would do. I think competing for that role alone, I'd rather just the Fellbats. Cheaper. They're not battle line as well, which is great. They can run up the board, and they're summonable. So if they die, you can try to bring them back. And you can pull them out of grain sites. They obviously can't burn a command point themselves, but yeah, I would argue that the Fellbats are just superior for that particular role.
Yep, and then I mean they have retreat and charge. So I mean, if they've already tied up something shooting to the point where you can get a melee like your Graveguard or your Blood Knights in there without eating an Unleash Hell, then they can retreat out and then charge something else and tie them up. And again, it's 75 points, and for 75 points, you're getting 9 wounds. Not great, but I mean, for 9 wounds for 75 points is fine with me. So
versus what, 150 for 12, so you get 3 Vargeist.
Yeah.
Did we talk about the unique dead? Yeah, we kind of did. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that for Thorby the newbie?
Sorry, which one?
That was the gravesite stuff. I think we kind of already talked about that. If you happen to miss it, like there wasn't like, I think it really depends on the battle plan, the opponent, what you're planning to do, and what type of units you're taking. I think that's the key, right?
Yeah, I mean it's again, it's all about how you deploy your army. You've also got to think about how you deploy your gravesites. Treat your gravesite tokens as a unit in your army. Deploy them in a way where they're going to be effective for your scenario.
I always like the psychological threat as well, and I try to put down those summonable grave sites close, so it might appear like I alpha strike or I'm going to steal a home objective, and I find that psychologically does more for me than actually what I pop out of the board, because there's a lot of things that need to go right, especially with 9 inches and screening and things like that. But talk to me about Castello. What drew you to the Castello bloodline?
So, I mean, first and foremost, I mean, I love Vordry. So I kind of just went and said, well, Vordry, he benefits from everything Castello, which should only make him better. But the more you dive deep into it, you start thinking about, you look at your command traits and kind of your artifacts. They're not the greatest artifacts, but there's some in there that are fun to play around with. But the biggest thing is the Might of the Crimson Keep. You start looking at what you want to kill, and then as you kill things with your Castello vampires, they gain a buff for the rest of the game. I mean, obviously you want to look at the add 1 to damage when you kill a hero or monster. Those are always fun. But I mean, add 1 to the wound characteristic for the unit. That when you kill a unit that has 3 or more wounds, so you look at your elite kind of a thing. Well, then you're looking at your unit of Blood Knights. If it's still at full strength, you're now looking at 20 wounds you got to chew through, as opposed to 15, right? So that can stack up pretty well. And then honestly, if you just kill anything else, it's just kind of like battle line. That's where you get your charge modifiers. You get +2 to your run and charge. So +2 to charge, as we all know, is a big deal. It's pretty fun. So
cool. What about the shifting keep? Like, if I'm going to run Castello, should I always take a unit of Blood Knights, given that I can put them into reserve and then come from the table edge so long it's within 6 inches of the table edge outside of 9?
So
is that like I should take it?
So for this isn't the reason why you always take Blood Knights. Now, obviously, the thing that they are battle line, so I mean, it always benefits from that. Might of the Crimson Keep is honestly the reason why you take Blood Knights, because as you do things with them, you can buff them, and the command trait that we're going to talk to later, it'll make them a little bit more killy than what they are. But I mean, it's definitely a bonus when you're against a shooting army and you want to keep a couple Blood Knights alive a little bit longer. Bringing things in reserve, that you're looking at the psychological again. Where are these Blood Knights going to come in, right? If you're a 1-drop, and then as you put things down, I won't put my Blood Knights down first. So then I'll gauge on what you do your first drop. If I don't need to put them down, then I'm not using the reserves. But you're always going to be thinking about, when you're deploying those things, about those reserves. You have to.
Yeah, I always like, again, going back to my Legion of Night experience, same thing. You hold off those units right till the very end. You don't do it at the start. When you have your Blood Knights, you declare it at the very end and you drag it out and you see how your opponent is going to respond. Did you notice a behavioral change? Like when you say, right, I've got this unit that could go into reserve, do you find them just deploy as normal? Do you find they stretch out? Do you try to like zone out and kind of deny as much of the board as possible? What do you find?
Well, I mean, generally there's I think the question that will always be asked to you at a competitive tournament is, do you have any sort of reserves or deep striking? Because then people are obviously going to think about that when they're deploying or moving around the board. So I think it's a great play to make your opponent always think about it. Now, for me, I'm the list. I think both of them that I have, I'm running 3 units of 5.
All right, let's just bring up the list. Let's
Yeah,
not dance around it. Let's just get into the list. So this is the first list that you wanted to talk about, and I really want, like, despite the title of the video being "Mannfred did nothing wrong," we've really actually not talked a lot about Mannfred, which I think definitely deserves a discussion because it also ties into this movement shenanigans that we're talking about with Blood Knights. But
right.
the first list you've got is Mannfred. You've got Double Spell, Fading Vigor, Decrepify. You got Prince V, Vordry with pinions and Vile Transference. Your White King on Steed. I love that model. Can you buy it yet individually, or was it locked into that box?
I think it's just locked in the box right now. Yeah,
man, that was such a good model. I remember it reminds me of the olden White King on Steed.
but it's a great box. It's a great box if you want Graveguard. So, and Hex Race.
Yeah, yeah. You've got Rousing Commander as the command trait, Arcane Tome as the artifact, and then you'll notice actually what I really like is you've gone the additional enhancements. So all 3 of them have double spell. If anyone's wondering, Uranus Adventure is telling me it's still in the start collecting box, which is a real shame. It's a great model. As someone who's already got 1 million Death Rattle models, I don't need more. And you've also got 20 Graveguard, 3 units of Blood Knights, a Corpse Cart with the Unholy Lodestone, Emerald Life Swarm wrapped up with Hunters and the Warlord Battalion. Coming in at 8 drops. So we talked a little bit about, do I want to go 1 drop? Well, first off, you've gone, nah, we'll go 8.
Yep.
So talk to me through this list. And I really want to spend some time on Mannfred because, as Jason Tipping has said, indeed, he has done nothing wrong.
I mean,
although he said he's done nothing, but
yep, he's technically done nothing wrong. I mean, he just kind of steered things in the direction that he needs them to be in. Yeah, so I'll just finish my thought about the Blood Knights being in reserve, because if I don't, I'll forget about it. But I mean, if you have a unit or 3 units of them, it wouldn't hurt to have 1 in reserves to kind of mess with it. But I mean, again, you don't always have to. But again, we're talking about psychological. If I'm going to force you to spread out your deployment more than you normally would, if you're a elite castle army, and you're worried about my deep striking, then there we go. Yeah.
All right. So I actually didn't realize you hadn't finished your comment on the
No, it's all good.
But let's talk this list. I'm very excited.
So Mannfred. Okay, so we haven't talked about Mannfred, so I'll get into this guy right now. Truthfully, I don't have him in the other list, but this one, I think Mannfred is the best war scroll in the book. Could be could compete with Prince Vordry, but Mannfred offers so much because he's a Mortarch. So he will bring Lore of Death Mages, where you can put him in the middle of something, and because he is tanky, he can get those debuffs off. Where a Necromancer, you don't want to put them where they are, and it's kind of like because I've played enough Night Haunt to know you don't want any of those wizards to be anywhere. to get those debuffs out, which is a shame. But
Mm.
Mannfred allows you to do that, and he can cast 2 spells. So Fading Vigor, where is it here? Yeah, Fading Vigor is it's subtract 1 from attack characteristic. And again, if you spike that 9+, that's one where you can actually subtract 2 from attack characteristic. If you spike that, so again, that's pretty crippling into what you throw him into. A Gargant, for example, every single one of their attacks is -2, and then another one is Decrepify. You can spike the 9+, but the -1 to wound won't stack because you just can't stack that one. But you can subtract damage twice, which again kind of nerfs the hell out of a killy boy. And Mannfred can cast both of those, and he's fast enough where what does he do? 16 inches when he's not degraded, which is kind of dumb. Yeah, he's movement 16, which is kind of nuts. Again, like a regular vampire, he's 3+ save, so tanky, and he ignores the first wound or mortal wound that hits him in each
Yes.
phase. In each phase, not for the turn. So he can ignore a shot on in the shooting. He can ignore it as a spell. So that's a
And
good time.
And if long strikes or bow snakes are shooting you in the hero phase, guess what? That's 1 wound that you can also save as well. So
Yep,
between the ward as well as the armor of Templehof, I always loved that rule and the ability to then heal up later on.
exactly. And then I mean he's got um, the Sword of Unholy Power. So if you have any on, if he kills a model with that sword, if you keep him into close combat, which is the next rule that I'm going to get into, if he kills a model with it, that's where you can get your +1 to attack characteristic of a summonable unit. So now the Graveguard that are in this, because Mannfred kills 1 model, and if you strategically put him into something where you're probably going to do that, then he's giving that buff out just by killing something. But what makes Mannfred, in my opinion, so good is he should never die in combat, um, because he very well potentially could never be in combat. So at the start of the combat phase, the if he's in combat, so if he's within an enemy unit of 3 inches, you can just teleport him anywhere on the board outside of 9. Now, where some shenanigans happen with Mannfred is you make your charge, you do your monstrous action, teleport out, but because he's made a charge, he can still pile in 3 inches from where he lands on the board. So you can sneak an objective somewhere in there from him because he's a monster, so he'll count as 5 wounds.
When do you teleport out of combat versus when do you stay into combat? Because he's not too bad in combat. Like he's got a decent profile. He's got a couple of like Rend 2 attacks and he's got a 3+ armor save. He's decent enough, and as you said, he heals as well. And to Robert's point, yeah, look, he might die to thunder strike volley. I guess it depends on how many 6s they spiking at the 2 mortal wounds, right? But he's got a good chance of surviving. But if your long strike opponent has 6 and they shoot in the hero phase and then shoot in the shooting phase, there is a chance that he'll die. It's probably a good chance he'll die.
Yeah, but I mean, like what we said before at the beginning of this is the weakness of this army is always going to be shooting regardless. So it's just like damned if you do, damned if you don't. So kind of give him that shot. But Mannfred might also be one of those guys that if he survives Unleash Hell, with Unleash Hell being nerfed as they are, he'll be the one to eat your Unleash Hell and then keep him into combat with the shooting unit, because generally the shooting unit doesn't hit that hard. So he can tie up something, and then honestly, when he's about to die from that, then you teleport him out and heal him.
And you probably wouldn't mind him dying compared to like you'd probably prefer Prince Vordry stay on the table than Mannfred, right?
In this army, yeah,
Yeah,
because
in this
Yep.
list.
Yeah, because Mannfred doesn't benefit from the Castello buffs. So he can kind of just be off on his own where he doesn't need to be. I don't have to be mindful of the aura around him from the White King. But I mean, like he's just a thing where he will be, if you need him to be somewhere, he'll be there. You could you make your charge, or you just throw him up the board. If you need him to be somewhere else, that's all the way across the board. You throw him up his 16 inches or whatever he moves at the if he's degraded. You charge him in, and then you tell him port him out, and Bob's your uncle. He's across the board. Um, and then now you start thinking about he can use Vigor of Undeath in the next hero phase where he's adding 1 to hit and wound rolls for a unit as a command
Yeah.
ability. So he's something that you would swap out with your Coven Throne. Yeah, he's more points, but he kind of does the same thing minus the +1 to save. So you can put Vigor of Undeath on Vordry, and then again not have to worry about casting his War Scroll spell to give him the exact same thing.
And he will benefit from his own command ability, right? The Vigor, or no, it's not even, yeah, his command ability, Vigor of Undeath. He'll benefit because it's just friendly Soulblight within
Yep.
within
Yeah,
12.
he can cast it on himself. It doesn't say the another unit, which was what Vordry's does specifically say that another hero will fight in the hero phase if you use the command ability, not Vordry. But yeah, no, he could definitely benefit from himself.
Yeah, I think the challenge, and like Lavana's mentioned, it took me a while to learn how to get the most out of Mannfred. And he's very much a utility piece. You know, he's a jack of all trade, master of none. He plays like he reads in the lore when you read him. You know, he is not a vampire lord on Zombie Dragon or Prince Vordry. You don't go up the middle of the board and try to find the juiciest targets. And Mannfred is all about in the lore sneak attacking, finding the weak points, and when I get Mannfred into combat, that's where I like to put him as opposed to being that vampire lord or Prince Vordry, right?
Yep.
So I think you've got to have that mindset to get the most out of him because he's got a really good buff aura. He's a good caster. He can fight in combat, but he also has the ability, as you mentioned, to teleport shenanigans and other things. So if you want utility, he's great, but he is competing against other combat monsters. It could be a Terrorgeist. It could be, another vampire lord or whatever it might be.
Yeah, but I mean that's again, it's exactly right though. You throw him into the things. It's like what Mannfred is in the lore. Manfred's the guy that he'll go where he needs to be when he knows he has the chance of winning, or he'll probably win because he's a sneaky boy. So no,
Mm.
I'm not gonna throw him into a unit of for example, I'm not gonna throw him into a unit of wardens. The wardens will hurt him pretty badly because mortal wounds hurt him. But another thing that I'll use from if you're rocking iron jaws on me, Mannfred's my screen. Because potentially I'll stop a charge from your Maw Crusher, and you're throwing all the buffs on the Maw Crusher in that one battle round, and see ya. I'm gonna teleport out, and you can't use that now.
To it,
Go ahead.
keep going.
Oh yeah. I mean, like he's not a bad screen in some instances as well, where you can put him in between something. Because again, as I said, he should never die in combat. Yeah.
To and asking an interesting question, and I have a thought, and I would answer it as no. Like, would I ever run double Mortark in a competitive? And by the way, like everything we've said here, folks, is about getting the most efficiency out of the list. If you have some narrative, or if you love these models, or they're your favorite kits, and you want to run Neffy and Manny, absolutely, you do you, whatever it is, right? But from a pure competitive point of view, would you ever run a double Mortark? I would say no, because I still need that combat threat monster type thing. And whether it's a Prince Vordry or I need bodies and I need something
Yep.
combatty, and they both are too many points and I lose too much.
Yeah.
What are your
Neither
thoughts?
Mortark are your hammer. They're just not as much as you know they're monsters and you think they might be. They're not. Both of them are utility pieces. They're fantastic utility pieces at under 400 points. But because Manny's 380 and Neferata is so 3.5 or something like that, I wouldn't do it because then you're just you're throwing points away into two things where you can put the same amount of points or slightly more into something that will just say you pointed at it and it'll kill it, right? Yeah, I mean, Neferata's got her shenanigans, where she's got a little pointy dagger, and on a 5+, it'll just auto kill a hero. Cool. But no, I think you're losing out if you bring both of them. So
Yeah. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Prince Vordry. Is there anything else you want to add with Manny? I think you're right. Like, I agree with you. I see him as a utility piece. I don't see him as my primary combat monster. I'm not seeing him as
he's not. No.
one of my threat pieces. I want to have at least 3 threat pieces that can kill things.
Yeah. Yeah, his
Mannfred
threat
support.
is the debuffs and the buffing into something else. So the spells that he can take, the Necromancer spell lore is fantastic, by far better than the Vampire spell lore, in my opinion. So he's got the debuffs, and he can cast both of them, and then get out of dodge. So yeah, he's not your hammer. He's your buff/debuff piece, 100%.
What about Vordry? Because I have never been a fan of Vordry. I've always preferred the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon because it gives me the customization. I've always enjoyed giving it a command trait, an artifact. I always preferred that over the named character.
So
what's the argument for Prince V?
So Prince V is guaranteed. He's not as swingy as your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And in Castelli, Castelli's artifacts aren't the greatest, to be honest with you. It'll be nothing to really buff the damage and whatnot for them. But Vordry is guaranteed damage. You don't need to put extra things into him, and then you can put Rousing Commander on something else. Yeah, he's good. And honestly, if you do pair him off with uh, a another Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, because realistically in Castello you can do that. His command ability will allow that Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon to fight in the hero phase, which, I mean, you're losing the buff, or the buff from the charge, but I mean the dragon can still snap at you pretty good, so it's not a bad thing to have in the hero phase. He's also super tanky, so he has a once per battle you can bring back or you can heal D6 wounds, which is definitely always really good. His lance on the charge does more damage than the lance on a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. Yeah.
Who in this list would benefit from the Fist of Nagash? Because the Fist of Nagash, correct me if I'm wrong, is another hero. So it's not a self buff. It's another Soulblight hero that's within combat. Because I imagine, at least in my mind, I'd be running Prince V and a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. And by the way, like, you know, I'm questioning you because I'm sure people listening to this are thinking about the decision tree, but at the same time, it might be not something that you really want to build around, you know, because it's a cool rule, be able to fight. If you're if you're in, you know, in the hero phase, you can fight in the hero phase, but obviously he doesn't buff himself. And we've already just talked about Mannfred not being the best combat hero.
Yeah, in this list, Fist of Nagash, I mean, you would just save your command point, to be honest with you. Soulblight Gravelords hero. I don't understand the chat that just came up on there where it wouldn't benefit
That's
the
all right.
Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon, but
I guess if you're going to run Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon with the Fist of Nagash and your Prince V, you'd have to run them close because, you know, being wholly within 12 on the base size of the it means they're running really as a tag team. I mean, yeah, you could run Chataka and things like that as well.
Yeah. Again, this command ability, it's more of a bonus, like a lot of other things. It would work well with Radjikar, but I personally, and this is just completely personal preference, I don't like Rajkar for what he brings to the table. Um, but I think just Vordry is more reliable damage on the charge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just what it is. And then he benefits from your Castello buffs as well. So the second you get your plus to damage on that, then his lances on the charge are what are they? -3 Ren 5 damage, which is fun. Yeah, so
No, and you know, obviously people can do whatever they want, right?
mhm.
Because you know, White Dwarf did give you some zombie dragon mount traits, you know, and some of them are okay. Like I wouldn't drop Prince Vordry for a mount trait on its own. There's pros and cons, obviously, and in Castelli, yeah, you're right. The keyword bingo definitely benefits more, but maybe it's because I don't play Castelli. I don't see the value in Prince V, but what you've just shared so far, absolutely, I can hear it, and I think that's probably one thing I've noticed from the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon is it's probably a bit swingy when it's in combat. Like it's good, but there's a lot of things I can't rely on.
Yeah, and then honestly, another thing that Vordry really brings to the table is he counts as the general in Castelli as
Yes.
well. Um, there we go. Adam just said it. But yeah, I mean, he counts as a general as well. So I mean, that's another thing where if you snipe out your hero that's got rousing commander, even though by the time he's dead you should have already used it at that point, you will still get your command point from him for being a general. So yeah, I mean,
Talk,
he's just honestly he's just an all around beat stick, and he's 20 points more than a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon. So I mean, generally for the most part, you would probably have that 20 points to spend for a little bit more reliable damage and reliable keeping a general in your army. So 20 points to keep getting that extra command point is worth it in my opinion as well. So.
what at the rest of the list? How's the rest work?
So, in terms of just like a hero to keep up, I the White King on Skeletal Steed. He's just a fast boy. He's 14 inches. He also has the 3+ save, and he's also got the command point or the command ability to help out my Graveguard. And he's the biggest base that I could fit in this army to have Rousing Commander be as big as I possibly can. And I've given him the Arcane Tome just to kind of be another delivery system of your Emerald Lifeswarm, which will, I mean, you throw it on either Vordry, Mannfred. I mean, you put it on anything, and then your tankier things are now gaining more wounds back. So you're getting, it's just a delivery system. And he's also just a buff piece for the Graveguard, really. And he's 130 points beefy little fast boy. So, and it's a beautiful model. So there you go.
You know, it's interesting because you often see the Graveguard paired with, as I mentioned, you know, the Vampire Lord on foot because he gives you the +1 attack, making you know Graveguard a real blender. So I imagine you got some thoughts there, and you know, Rousing Commander is once per battle at the start of the combat phase. If you do so until the end of the phase, the Castelli Vampire unit wholly within 12 of the general will benefit from the bloodied strength and stolen vitality from the might of the Crimson Keep.
Yeah,
So
so that's the one. I mean, the one that is key in that is the first one. Where for that combat phase, Castelli vampires gain plus to their damage. So again, that makes Vordry if he's within range. But Vordry's already hitting pretty hard anyways. But now
yeah,
you're looking at your Blood Knights on the charge now 3 damage apiece instead of so they have their extra, and they also have extra wounds, so they can stick into combat a little bit easier. Um, Sadly, I mean, Blood Knights the rend hurts them, but always having that extra damage on 15 attacks, or sorry, 14 attacks because the leader gets an extra attack. Uh, those will add up because I mean they're an elite unit. They're 3s and 3s, 3 damage on the charge, and if you get in this list all 15 within that aura into something, it's going to do work. And then chances are it will gain from a buff somewhere, um, depending on what you kill. But realistically, you could throw 2 units of them into a hero, or 1 unit of them into a hero, and then they'll get the damage buff because second you kill a hero, even if it's a foot soldier or a foot hero. Um, But yeah, Rousing Commander is sadly it's only once per battle, but I understand why, because it's quite good.
Yeah.
But if you can castle around that aura, which is why I prefer it to be on a bigger base, and you'll see that in the next list, then the damage multiplier is nuts. So that command ability or the command trait alone is the reason why I did so well in the famous Red Harvest game that Team Canada was shit talking Josh for. So
Well, let me ask you not about shit about poor old Josh, but let me ask you about the command trait, because in the chat someone asked a really good question, and I could see where this would play out. Is, the alternative someone might be tempted to take Swift and Deadly, which allows you to re-roll charge rolls for those Castello units wholly within 12. So surely you'd want to be able to re-roll charges for the Blood Knights, the Grave Guard who might be popping out of the gravesite. Would that not be a better benefit over a once per battle rousing commander?
So I mean, there's arguments for both, and I think that's the beauty of this book. There's arguments that can go so many different ways, and it's all really dependent on play style. For me, the rousing commander is all about your alpha strike. I'm going to kill you turn 1, 2, whatever, but very quickly. Rousing commander, it almost just gives me the ability to do that much easier. Whereas I have the extra rerolls of charge, it's fine, but Blood Knights are fast enough, and then this is where I'll get into Blood Knights now. Blood Knights are fast enough to almost always have a half decent charge, but the good thing about them is they can cycle charge, and generally always benefit from the buff to damage on the charge, because they have an ability to do a normal move out of combat. And because it's considered a normal move out of combat, they can always cycle charge. And the good thing about these guys is if you're against, and now correct me if I'm wrong on the wording, but it's a wound characteristic of less than 4 or 3, I think, or something like that, and not on a mount, the Blood Knights can pass over what they're in combat with, and then all of a sudden they're charging in your backline.
3. You're talking the Riders of
3.
Ruin?
Yeah, 3. It's 3.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, you're doing the mortal wounds when you pass over them. But the key to this is, I mean, you're looking at, and I'm so sorry, Josh, but you're looking at Lumineth, where I'm now passing over your wardens, which are your screen, and your super elite army, and now I now have potentially 3 units of Blood Knights that are charging techless.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where they become sneaky as well, because you might have thought you've screened me out, but if I'm able to pass over you because Blood Knights move 10 inches, well, there's a half decent chance that I'm either passing over you, fighting your squishy heroes in the back, or I'll just back out 3 inches and then recharge you and then get the buff again.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I was having a little laugh to myself because I remember when, again, the Soulblight book came out and everyone saw this rule and they're like, this is useless. This needs to be FAQ'd. And then like third edition hit a couple of months later, like, this is how it works. It's a great rule. It's a really good rule. And they heal as well. And like Blood Knights are great.
Yeah, they get. I mean, again, they benefit from the hunger. Sadly, the Vargeist, I think, are the only vampire keyword thing in the book that don't benefit from it.
Yeah.
But then you add in Emerald Life Swarm. You can spike an Emerald Life Swarm and get a unit back on them, right? If they're 3 wounds. So I mean, like, and they're tanky boys. I mean, they're a 3+ save again for 195 points. Yeah, they're a little bit expensive, but they're fast. They do what they need to do, and if by chance I get that charge in your back hero, so if you're looking at a wizard on foot, chances are the 5 Blood Knights are killing that thing, and then now you're looking at the +1 to damage because I've killed a hero.
Someone in the chat did ask before if the Emerald Life Swarm was overkill, and I would say maybe in a zombie or skeleton heavy list where you've got a lot of summonables, I'd probably say the Life Swarm could be, obviously it depends on the list, but it could be a bit of an overkill from a healing perspective. But in this type of list where your Blood Knights aren't summonable, where you've got a lot of powerful units like Mannfred, like Prince Vordry, and they're not really self-healing, and you don't want to be relying on a heroic action, especially because you're in combat. Once you're in combat, you can't use that heroic action now as per the winter FAQ. So getting a reliable heal and from some good spellcasters from the, in the army, I don't think for a second this is a bad decision in this particular list.
No, because this list, and again, these lists were written. So keep them like this is just to show what this book can do. This list was written, and you and I chatted about this off of this. Is I didn't want to bring something that Levon has showcased. I wanted to bring some other units, and truthfully, this is actually a similar list to what I ran at Red Harvest. But I mean, there's tweaks here or there that I would make to stay a little bit more competitive. But these lists they can do work. And truthfully, this book is very fat middle, anyways. So it's I don't know. I'm probably biased, but I think it's a borderline perfectly written book because it's perfectly fat middle, the way I look at it. So
2 more questions about this list.
sure.
One, I'm not going to let go of what you literally just said. I'm going to make sure I loop back to that. Holy Lodestone, what's the corpse cart doing, and why the Holy Lodestone over the other one?
Balefire.
Yes.
It's just to help guarantee some of the spell casting to get off. I mean, anything to help me get that Emerald Life Swarm off. Cool. But Invigorating Aura, that's something that we haven't talked about, is any Soulblight wizard always has a spell, which is, you'd almost treat it as like a War Scroll spell, but it's not. Invigorating Aura is a spell that I can cast that was successfully cast. I can also bring back another D3 summonable units, or heal another D3 summonable. And that one can also spike, but you can't heal the same unit. But if I have more than one summonable unit, then I can split it, do 1d3 1d3. It's just another layer of healing, and the more heroes you have in your army, it's +1 to cast that. So again, and then I'm also another +1 to cast because of the lodestone. So anything to kind of guarantee my healing spells or my buff spells or even my debuff spells, depending on where Mannfred is at the time, it helps. It really does. So yeah. That's
The corpse cart is great, especially like when you got like a necromancer or a foot vampire. I think the challenge is keeping the corpse cart in range for the wizards you want to buff, right? Which is why you always see it with a little foot troop as opposed to a supercaster. But even like getting that turn 1 supercast off when they're all kind of deployed around the center is usually worth, especially like 80 points. It could be holding a back objective once everything's kind of up the board.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's 80 points, right? I mean, you could use the same justification of what I said about Black Knights, where it's just like, oh, that's 100 points. If you got 100 points and you can fit it in and you find a utility for it, then it's 100% worth it. I'm not saying that the corpse cart is on the same level as Black Knights. It's 100% better. But it's 80 points. It's 80 points, right? If you can fit it and you could still potentially get your triumph, then why not? It will never hurt your army. It'll only make it stronger if it's in range, right? So
cool. Anything you want to mention about the Graveguard, by the way? We haven't really quite talked about them.
Yeah,
I mean, they're choppy. They do mortal wounds. You haven't built around them because, again, you mentioned you haven't got the Vampire Lot on foot. You haven't got a Van Hale's Dance Macabre from a Necro. You haven't got. I mean, is it the White King supporting them?
The White King and Mannfred can support them with Mannfred's little buff that he's got. His command ability is quite good with them. But I think the Graveguards are fine just the way they are, and they don't need too many more buffs because they're already kicking the crap out of you. They really are. I mean, you're running a block of 20 of them. They're a small basis, so you're always getting 2 ranks in because they're 1-inch reach. And I run Great Blades because it's 2 damage. Is just you do what you do, and then 6s on the wound. Yeah, 6s on the wound are a mortal wound in addition, which you don't get much of that with a horde army on there. So, and then if you get Mannfred's ability off on them, Soulblight Graveguard +1 hit, +1 wound, then you're looking at 2s and 3s on the Great Blades. And 2 damage apiece with a lot of them that are potentially in there. And if you get your +1 to attack from Manny, then also fantastic. So, and re-rolling hit rolls of 1 from your depending on how you do it. But there's pieces in there that'll help them. But I think they're nuts. Even just as vanilla, you enforce them once, and they're pretty crazy. So
I think what I like about your list as well, Matt, is that when I come up against an opponent where I can see they've got 1 or 2 blocks of Graveguard and they've got the Vampire Lord or some other support unit, it's very clear on what I need to kill in order to shut down your attack. But you've got multiple threats here. You've got the Blood Knights, you've got the Graveguard, you've got Mannfred, you've got Prince Vordry. So as an opponent, where do I focus and what do I try to take down? Well, it's quite a hard answer. So I think that's what I like about your list. There's a lot of diversity. Could you go harder? Absolutely. You could bring in a different hero to take on the Fist of Nagash to pair up with Prince Vordry. You could go the vampire on foot to support the Graveguard. You could go 2 units of Graveguard, or you could go with something with the Blood Knights. But I think you've got lots of different threats that ask a lot of questions from your opponent. And if they focus on one thing, you've got a couple of others to kind of respond.
yeah, it's so you've got your Blood Knights Vordry. They're fast enough uh, to get to where they need to be and start fighting some stuff. And then you've always got to think about, are the grave guards coming up from the grave, or am I just going to foot slog them up the board and then eventually charge them? Probably going to get them up from the grave because I don't want them to get shot off the board. But who knows? I mean, it really depends on the game. And that's the beautiful thing about this book. And there's also things that I can sub in and out of this list and keep it either as competitive or more competitive, because there's a lot of options in this book. Save some points, drop the grave guard, add a bunch of zombies, which also hit quite hard, but I now have a giant piece of real estate and I'm actually saving some points. So I mean, it's fun. There's a lot of layering threats in Castello, and it's a drastically different list than what you're seeing Levon running. And I'm not saying Levon's running it wrong, because Levon has shown fantastic success and he's been playing really well with it. It's just not my style of playing. But it's the point of this list is to show that there isn't one way to play this book to be competitive.
And that's the purpose of these shows, is never to show you that this is the one internet list that everyone should run and go be successful and go smash your opponents. It's about showing the diversity. And if you want to see different things, yes, you can talk to Levan. You've seen Alex on this channel as well. We've had a couple of Soulblight lists. So you pick and choose what you like. Yep. And if you love Belladama, you want to build around, the Avangorian, or you want to build around something, even if you're, Legion of Blood, you can take some ideas from this and go, right, well, what if I put Blood Knights into Legion of Blood? Or what would Graveguard do if I put them into Blah? And you can, mix and match. And that's what this is all about. It's never about the single internet list.
Like I've run variations of this list where one game, Mannfred will be my absolute MVP. On Jordan's channel, when I played against his Stormcast with a variation of this list, I was running Vicros, so it wasn't Prince V, it was a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, but Mannfred just teleporting around the board, just taking stuff. I mean, he was my I had barely anything left on the board, and he did. He was awesome. And is he not killing things? He could kill a couple of his foot soldiers, but the utility of him just being exactly where you need him to be, wherever you need him to be at that exact point, it's fantastic. Is he the be all and end all of this book? Absolutely not.
No. And I think we talked about that. We sub him out for other things, right? Belladama, Chataka, Neffy, whatever, like generic vampire and zombie. Anything else you want to talk about with this list, or let's show off the other version of some alternative thinking around this?
Yeah, no, I think I've pretty well covered everything. I mean, the Warlord, we've done it. I mean, and then obviously I've got a Hunters of the Heartland in there. We all know what that does.
How critical is it to your Blood Knights?
It's fantastic. I mean, if they're not taking extra mortal wounds, or I want that buff to give them all out attack, I can guarantee it being there. Because that's a unit of 5. It's a small unit and it's an elite unit, and I want to be able to buff them to maximize their potential while they're still on the board. So
how important, or how important is it to protect from like an unleash? I'm sorry, like a raw.
I wouldn't say it's critical, but I mean it's fantastic to have. Being able to and well, you probably never need to inspire them, but having all out attack with them, I mean hitting on twos with their regular attacks, especially when they've charged, you're just guaranteeing that extra, guaranteeing a little bit more damage to get through. It's all about maximizing the potential and being able to mitigate debuffs or things that prevent me to do what I need to do. Hunters of the Heartland is fantastic for that in this edition. So
I guess I only ask you because if someone was thinking about this type of list, but in like a battle reg, what are you giving up in order to do hunters? And yes, all that attack and all that defense, bring it down to a 2-up, and obviously you can save stack with Mystic Shield and blah blah blah. If you wanted to go 1-drop, absolutely, but just know that you're giving up a few things, especially a stomp, a roar, and things like that.
yep, and one thing that I haven't brought up for any of this list is the ability to save stack from this army, especially on your vampires, is very easy. So
as we transition to the second list, really quick question from Thubi the newbie. What about the Arcane Tome on the White King? Why did you do that as opposed to the Castello artifacts?
So for me, because I just wanted another delivery system of Emerald Lifestorm, to be completely honest with you, and then having the ability of having something else cast Mystic Shield onto a unit that I need to or I want to have it. It's just there, and then I can free up Mannfred to cast his 2 debuff spells, and then Prince Vordry, I free him up to be able to cast Pinions or his War Scroll spell to give him +1 attack and wound, or +1 to hit and wound. And one thing that we didn't talk about was Vile Transference, because Gargants are a thing. You put Vordry in combat. Well, for the people that don't know what Vile Transference is, it's a spell that a unit within 3 inches of it, if it's successfully cast, I roll a dice equal to the wound characteristic. So now you're looking at just sniping out heroes, monsters. And why I say Gargants is the thing, because it's either 35 or 40 wounds.
I was going to say it happened to me against my 40 wound general. Like, you jerk.
Did he double spike it? Because then that 40
no, there was no double spike.
Because then that 40 dice now becomes 80 dice, and as you take a mortal wound, then Vordry also heals up. So it's just another way of healing, keeping Vordry on the board as well. So
yeah, no, it's very cool. And like, this is why I like the Soulblight book, because there's a lot of little techie pieces, and you've got a lot of things you can move around and manipulate and adapt as best as you can to the competitive meta. So the alternative kind of build, and I see we've got Yuri's all fired up, because now I think we're cooking with gas now. The other build is your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, is the General Deathlance, Sword of the Red something sectional, and then you've got the mount trait, one of the White Dwarf mount traits, which allows you to re-roll that breath attack. Yep. And then you've also got Flaming Weapon as the universal spell lore, Prince V with Pinions, and you've gone the Coven Throne with Vile Transference. So nice to see a wizard wagon around. You've got 2 units of Blood Knights, a unit of 40 zombies, and then a unit of Blood Knights. You've got 3 units of Blood. Well, I don't know why I've done that. And then you've got Hunters and Battle Reg. So
it might have been how I submitted it to you, because I was just like, oh shit, I have room for 5 more Blood Knights. Sweet. But yeah, so this is where I put the Battle Reg. I do have a Battle Reg. I mean, again, it's 5 drops, but I mean, I very well could have done Hunters of the Heartland in there, but I mean, there are units or games out there where you're going to see something where you're not running into the Battle Reg, and 5 might actually get you the turn 1, right? So you never know. But I still have Hunters, and I just, with this list, I didn't really need the extra spell on Mannfred. They were taking the 2 spells on Mannfred to being able to cast both of the Necromancer spells is the reason why I did it, because again, I can't reiterate enough that that spell lore is fantastic. But yeah.
How does this list play differently to what we previously? Because there's some commonality, right? You've got Prince V, and you got a block of 3 Blood Knights. That core is there, but then you've interchanged some bodies with the zombies. No Graveguard, we've got zombies instead. You've lost Manny, you've lost the White King on Steed, and instead you've got another combat threat in the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, and you've got that Coven Throne utility piece, right? So what's the difference between the two? How do they obviously play differently, and what are you building around here versus what we didn't go through?
Well, so going back to what I was talking about in terms of um, the general ability is the finding the biggest base possible to allow for that aura to be as big as possible for rousing commander, which I don't think I put it on there actually, but rousing commander is generally what I put on all of my generals. It's just my play
Okay, so
style.
this one still has rousing commander.
Yeah. Because the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, his base size is basically a pie. So it's a giant, and again, it's just maximizing that aura, where I can reliably get most, if not all, of those vampires within that aura to do some work. I would also sometimes put it on the Coven Throne. So this is a list. This is basically the list that I ran to Red Harvest that did the work. And it's a lot of damage. Yeah, you're right, Yuri.
I was just rereading this sword. I'm like, oh, what does that sword do? And I just looked at it. I'm like, yes, I can't wait to talk about this. This is my type of list. I
Yeah.
am a Timmy. I love to run monsters. Talk to me about tell me about how this plays out.
All right. So, much like Prince Vordrai, whatever you point that Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon at, it's gonna either kill it or do some work to it. You throw it into a giant unit or something. Now you're looking at the sword of that thing. The sword, half the crap in this book you can't even pronounce. That's the only thing I don't like about it. But that artifact, you kill a model, similar to what the hunger would be. You kill a model and then you get the heal. With this one, you kill any model. It could just be, it could be a git, all right. Then you're looking at a wholly within 12 inch aura. Yeah, wholly within 12-inch aura where I'm adding 1 to wound.
Yeah,
And
that's
now
powerful.
I'm looking at the pie plate again. That 12-inch aura around that pie plate is a pretty big aura, where things are going to be +1 to wound. So yeah, I
Does
mean,
that mean you're fighting first with him? Like he's always, you want to get him in first, fight, and
I think
then
again, I would say for the most part, yeah, probably. Just to get that buff going. But if it makes sense for me to go into Vordrai, where like Vordrai, to be honest with you, Vordrai and Yuri's seen it. Vordrai has the capability of potentially one-shotting a Gargant. You got to really spike. You got to really spike those rolls. But I mean, if you do, it happens. I didn't do it against Yuri. Uh, Yuri's game was a little bit more of a grind at that same tournament, but the game before him, I did it to another Gargant player where I did some work to him. But it's all a matter of where it makes sense. For the most part, you would probably do the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon just to get that buff out there. But yeah, it's just I call this list the Bash Brothers for a reason, because Vordrai and the Vampire Lord and Zombie Dragon are just gonna absolutely shred some things. So
what does the Deathlance profile look like if you put down Flaming Weapon and then you charge with the Deathlance? Because the Deathlance gives you what, an additional rend -1 and +2 damage.
So the Deathlance on a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon, on the charge you add 2 to damage and you add 1 to rend. So now you're looking at 4 damage, rend 2, but then you add Flaming Weapons to the Deathlance. So now you're looking at extra damage on that. And then you add the Castello buff to get another +1 damage.
So we're looking at about 5 damage a piece for on the charge. And then, of course, when you kill something, you then give the +1 to wound aura to everything else. And you've obviously got Prince Vordry's Fist of Nagash that allows you to fight in the hero phase. And obviously that won't work because the +1 to wound buff only works in that phase. But if he's stuck in combat and you've got, you can have a great hero that can fight himself out with that Fist of Nagash.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if by chance how I've got them layered into each other, Yeah, Levon's right. I mean, that would be one of the main reasons why you take Prince V. Going back to the point is on the charge, his rend is actually better. That just goes back to the argument of the more reliable damage. But if I by chance I get to fight a Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon in the hero phase, um, well, I mean, yeah, I don't benefit from the charge buff, but his zombie's gonna the dragon's gonna do work too, right? So if I've got to kill three models or take off 5 wounds or something like that out of that, chances are I can do it and then get and free him up in the movement phase. So sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. So
Yeah, it's a wonderful tag team. I love that tag team, and obviously, you got Blood Knights running up the board, supporting on the flanks, or getting into anything that you think that maybe they can't quite pull down, or to do some chip damage first and then pull it down by the Vampire Lord. Especially if you're doing something like, I don't know, bring it down, slay the Warlord, wherever it might be. You've got some really fast troops to support the Vampire Lord and Prince V. What about the Coven Throne?
Yeah, so I love the Coven Throne. The Coven Throne is my jam. Because for me, what it is, it's similar to what Mannfred did, but slightly better for the command point. Is it now? So I'll go into the command ability, Tactical Insight, +1 to hit, wound, and save rolls onto a unit wholly within 12.
Just
So
one. Just
just
one. So
one.
it's not like Mannfred, which is like an aura. Isn't it an aura, Mannfred? Is like anything within the 12?
Da, 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 da,
Or is Mannfred
da.
pick one as well?
Mannfred is the aura,
Yeah.
but the Coven Throne is again it frees up um, Vordry to not have to cast his War Scroll spell, where he can cast Pinions and get Vordry to where he needs to be. Because Prince Vordry going 20 inches with fly, it's insane. Get him to where he needs to be, and then honestly, he's now 2s and 2s on his lance, and he's now also a 2+ armor save. So then that goes back into the armor stacking of Vordry. Or you could do it on the Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon as well. I mean, it's a really good buff piece. But then if I do have the Coven Throne in range, because it is a vampire and it will gain Castello keyword. So how we said about not insane damage on the Blood Knights, but you're looking at predatory bite, 1 attack. So if I'm within rousing commander, it's D3 damage +1. The stiletto attack, 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1 rend, fine. But then that becomes 2 damage. So now you're starting to see a little bit more of a multiplication. And then your needle shot poniards, 8 attacks, 3s and 3s, no rend, fine, but also 2 damage apiece. So now your little chip damage with the weight of dice is now becoming a little bit more punchy than, or a lot more punchy based on weight of dice than what it normally would be. And in our meta, my local meta, is we have a lot of destruction players. So the Shudder spell is funny. It's funny and it's fantastic. Low bravery units that I don't want to fight, I'll tie you up with the Coven Throne, and then hopefully I'll beat your bravery. And then you're not attacking the Coven Throne. If that's the only thing in combat, then you're not doing anything with that. I'm forcing you to retreat, and if you don't have retreat and charge, then I'm shutting you down for another turn. So
Shudder is casting value of 6, and if it's successfully cast, you pick a unit within 12 of the caster. You roll 3d6, and if it's greater than the bravery, the model cannot be picked as a target. Spell.
Yeah, so the
ability.
Coven Throne can't be picked as a target by the unit that I've picked to beat the bravery. So
Right,
now
so Coven Throne goes into combat with, let's say, Mega Gargant. It has bravery 7. You roll the 3d6. So you beat the bravery. It means the Mega, if it's mono on mono with the Coven Throne, it can't fight. But if you
doesn't do
happen to
anything.
have, I don't know, Coven Throne and zombies within 3, then the Mega could still fight the zombies, just not the Coven Throne.
Just not the Coven Throne, but now again, that's where I'm now forcing you, or that's where you got to kind of play a little bit tactically. Is if you just have the Coven Throne, that Coven Throne is fast enough. It's 14-inch move, so it's pretty quick. and I'm beating your bravery, and if I'm constantly making it so you can't fight me, and I'm forcing you to retreat, you're not, because it's until the next hero phase as well, right? So uh, it's a one-time cast. So I make the cast, I beat your bravery, and if you double turn me, and the only thing in combat with the Coven Throne is your Gargant, you're not fighting for 2 turns, and I'm forcing you to retreat. Now you can still do monstrous actions to me, but that's fine. I'm okay with taking potentially D3 mortal wounds on a Coven Throne that's got a boatload, or a decent amount, 12 wounds, I believe. So I mean, you're not going to kill it. You might eventually in 4 turns if you spike. But I mean, the shutdown capabilities of a destruction, Maw Crusher. Uh, if I get within range of the Maw Crusher, chances are there is a chance that it could happen. Maw Crusher doesn't have the greatest bravery. Funny enough, it's 3d6. I've actually shut down Archaon for 2 turns.
One more call out I want to make just on tactical insight that I think we haven't quite called out, which I really like, is it's a hero phase command ability, which means they're obviously going to be able to benefit from all out attack, all out defense, all those other things in the relevant shooting or combat phase. So nice little stack there. But the other one I want to call out is it's not an aura per se. So what it allows you to do in the hero phase is point at something that's currently in range and then send it off. And the Coven Throne doesn't need to be supporting where Mannfred is at bubble. So Mannfred has to be keeping up with whatever he wants to buff. So nice little be able to buff it up and send it off the board.
Yeah,
Type,
it's just like a little pat in the butt. Go get him, kid. Right? Send your kid out to go play some hockey, and then it just sends him out. And then Vordry or your Vampire Lord on Zombie Dragon are now 2s and 2s, 2+ save. It's a great command ability, and these ladies on their weird step thing being carried by ghosts also went down, I believe, 20 or 30 points in the quarterly point adjustment, which at that point they were almost pointed out of my list, and then they went back down where I'm sneaking them back in again. So
anything you want to call out with the Blood Knights and the zombies, right? Like, I think people know we've already talked about the power of zombies, and we've talked about the Blood Knights and how they've worked in the previous list. Is much changing between these two lists in regards to how they operate?
not in regards to the Blood Knights, no. But your Deadwalker zombies and honestly, I would encourage you to watch the game or the interview with Levon. He'll go into the benefit of having a giant tar pit of Deadwalker zombies. But Levon and I talked about this offline a couple days ago, where he's like, "Well, you don't have anything to buff the Deadwalker zombies, but for me, my Deadwalker zombies serve 2 purposes. One is either just a giant tar pit on a back objective that you need to move, or if you give me the opportunity, I can auto run them up the board and then pile into a shooting unit."
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, there's a lot of things you can do, and that's what I love about this, is that you haven't leaned too heavily into one particular build. So if somebody wants to go more zombies, you can tweak this, pull out some Blood Knights, add a Necromancer, go from 40 to 60 zombies. There's, bring in the Coven Throne, the Corpse Cart. There's little things you want to do, but if you want to flex somewhere else, there's some ways to take what Matt's shared with us and make it your own and bring in your favorite toys. So. Anything else you want to add about that list? I really like both of the lists, and an alternative to some of the other lists out there.
No, I think I was just really happy to show that you can build an elite army with this book and still remain scary. Yeah. So
some might call it all elite.
Wrestling. There we go. AE dub.
Big wrestling fan, but yeah, no, I dig it, and then there's a lot of different ways we can do this, but and I think it's the testament to the depth of the Soulblight book that we could add Neferata to this, and how does the list change? How does this list change if you went more into Death Rattle and you brought in the Skellies, who I think are still good? I think there's some play if you were to bring in some Direwolves. Yep. Bringing in some Direwolves to run with the speed could be a fast tar pit that maybe the Deathwalker zombies don't bring to the table.
Yeah, I truly believe in this book there is synergies that we haven't really explored or been able to explore because the meta just hasn't shifted our focus into something different. But I think depending on if there's a shift in meta, all of a sudden you might start seeing Legion of Blood being a thing, right? I have never seen an Avangori ever list, but I would love to see one, and I'd love to see how they play it. Maybe I'll build one. I don't know, but I haven't seen one, so I don't really know how it'll go. But I think that this book has something for every meta,
Except shooting.
except
You
shooting.
can't shoot.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, I got this. I got. I'll bring. I'll run. What is it? I'll bring Vordry up the board and shoot him his 9 inches
No,
and hope.
look. You used to have Arcane the Black. Now he's over on the other side. Maybe you can broker a deal, and he can bring over some Screaming Skull catapults that we've rebranded as those OBR catapults. Bring back those. That's OG
yeah.
undead.
Or I mean, we could get the Lumineth treatment and get another random book, and we'll also get catapults or Tomb Kings will randomly get in there because Mannfred was over there learning about them. So who knows?
I'm all about Mannfred's all about friendship. Couple of last questions. What's
Sure.
the key to your success? Like, if you're breaking this down, if I'm a Soulblight player, what's going to win me my games? And again, I know, yes, different lists, different battle plans, but just like,
the key to this is I think this is very much how Iron Jaws are playing, where this list has alpha strike potential that will hurt you quickly and can hurt you quickly. And I think it will actually surprise a lot of people because Blood Knights on paper, if they're not buffed up properly, I wouldn't say they're terribly scary. But then you start layering in some of those buffs, and then your weight of dice in those guys, they are scary. And if you're running into a lot of people that aren't playing a lot of Blood Knights or the meta hasn't changed, I think this list can surprise people how fast it will kill and how fast it will get to you. Now it's no Nurgle flies that'll get to you turn one, but it's fast. And then Vordry moving his 20. He'll get to you pretty quick, and he's tanky enough where he could potentially survive. Next thing you know, by the time you've maybe killed him or got him down to a point where he's degraded pretty low. I now have 3 units of Blood Knights, a Zombie Dragon, or Mannfred and Graveguard. They're now layering into hurting you. This list specifically has a lot of things that are threats. Everything in this list that has threats. Black Knights with bows. I mean, look, if they give Black Knight bows, I still won't run them.
they're not. Let's be honest.
No.
Prime hunters and priority targets. Does this change anything for you? Obviously, you have no prime hunters, but you also have no prime targets. So should you come up against Fulminators, Stormdrake Guard, insert unit here, Pink Horrors, Bellacore, you'll get a couple of extra VP to kill them.
Yep.
Do you think it changed much for you and the Soulblight players?
Nope. If it does to anybody, I would be surprised, and I honestly I would love to hear your reasoning behind it. For me, it doesn't affect me because I'm not worried about giving you extra command points or extra victory points. If anything, it's only really helped this army. It hasn't negatively impacted me in one bit. So yeah.
Yeah, it's all upside for you. If you kill these units, you get extra VP. So they're still hard units to kill. It doesn't mean you need to change your list. And who knows how these priority target opponents, I think a Stormdrake player or a Fulminator player is still going to run what they run. It's still very powerful. But, should that shift the meta at all? We don't think it will, but in tournaments when they do, it might adapt your play style, or it might at least incentivize you. If there's less shooting attacks and there's more of X, who knows? But
yeah, I mean, I think the only people that may need to think about potentially what they're doing is Gargants, but even then, I don't think so. But I mean,
no, I do. I think Man Crushers need to come back into lists.
Right, because they're only the
Because
but I
only
mean,
the
like,
big boys.
if I take Night Haunt, and kill you with a night, or actually, you know what? Let's say this, Skaven, and because Skavens are they're the lower meta one guys, right? Where if any Skaven kills a primary target,
Yeah,
then
like Gloomspite Gits, and there's a few of them that are like
but
primary hunters.
at our last GT, we saw how powerful Skaven can be. And if Yuri's still in here, I'm sorry I brought this up, buddy. But
Is that Trentinelli? Was that Anthony Trentinelli who was doing really well with the Scryer, Mortal Wound, Thanquil type? Yeah.
yep. Well, you get. Thankfully for that, we weren't playing the new stuff that just came out. But I mean, you'll lose a Gargant to a Skaven or Gloomspite Gits or something like that. Then ouch. There's potentially 5 victory points just by losing your guy. 6 maybe, actually, if you do bring it down or whatnot, right? So
Second last question. Adam actually brought it up. I wasn't planning on asking you, but I think it's an important question. Not specifically what Adam's saying, but Nagash. Now that Nagash is not benefiting from Deathless, we used to see a lot of Nagash in death lists. Are you thinking about him in your list? Like, would you bring the big bad booty daddy to a Soulblight list?
I tried, and I think in Soulblight, I think there are still very expensive units that I would like to have in my list. Now that being said, I think right now Nagash's only home is Nighthaunt. Simply because the Nighthaunt spell lore is friggin' great. If they just don't have the wizards that can get close enough to use them, well, now they have Nagash. And honestly, I think that's the only time the only home for Nagash right now. He doesn't benefit anything from OBR. I don't think he really benefits too much from being in Soulblight. Actually, I don't think he benefits at all, truthfully. But yeah, Nighthaunt has the abilities to bring back models as opposed to wounds, where Nagash's thing will help with that, but not in Soulblight, sadly. So
I probably wouldn't bring him until he got his Deathless back. If Nagash had a Deathless either on the War Scroll or at least got that from his Allegiance, cool, different story. But right now, as it stands, no, I think you've got too many good hero choices natively that you don't, and multi-wound heroes, and that's why he works really well with Nighthaunt, because they lack those 10 wound or more heroes. You don't need that. You've got so many 10 plus heroes, those commander models, that you don't need him.
He doesn't need to be in there, and truthfully, I can take I can run my Bash Brothers list, both Vampire, Zombie, Dragon Boys, for the same amount of points as Nagash. So, yeah.
Final question. Do you have any deployment tips for me? Like, how do I, and again, yes, battle plan, terrain, opponent. Any advice for me how I deploy?
I think you can be a little bit more aggressive in your deployment than you think. Even though you have low model count, I think we are tanky enough to withstand a few things. And don't be afraid to not put things in a gravesite. I think use your grave sites as the advantage of let them deploy thinking you might do it. And then if you don't do it, then maybe they've deployed too defensively where they've opened up the middle of the board for you to get to where you need to be without using grave sites. So use those grave sites to your advantage to use or not use as you want. It's all pretty, there's a lot more tactics that you can use with gravesite and reserves to not use them and be a little bit more aggressive.
I actually got to a point where I actually had a measurement plan. So with my grave sites, I knew that I measured out, I think it was 12. I think what I used to do is I'd have at least one aggressive objective or gravesite, and I would measure it from their deployment zone, and I believe it was about 10 or 12 inches away. So I knew the circumference of the gravesite means that even like I wouldn't be too blocking myself, and I had some space in the back should they advance and all that stuff, right? So I actually created a plan so that when I got to the table, I wasn't guessing like I'm going to chuck it here. I actually measured it out and had a specific point. And Adam, to your question, we did already talk about this at the top of the show, but essentially Matt's feedback was having one objective, so one gravesite at least aggressively, at least for the psychological threat, one in the backfield so you can deny with home objectives and things like that, two on the flanks. You don't want to be too far out, but certainly making sure that you get to maximize those bubbles around the center of the board, really where the fight's going to be. But I guess each opponent, each different. If I'm playing Iron Jaws or Gargants and they're going to run up the board, I'm probably going to have them more closer to me. If I'm playing a shooting castle army, I'm going to have more up on their side. So
yeah, your middle objectives are really there just to have the well, I guess it would be, if you measure it out properly, actually a 48 inch around of just keeping deathless minions on your units that aren't necessarily being babysat by a hero. Because in these lists, I've kind of shown I want to throw my heroes up there and not really babysit the stuff in the back. So
no, and Diamond Platinum would be a good starting point, but I wouldn't necessarily restrict myself to this being the only pattern. It maybe is my default, and then when I get to my opponent, I then adjust and move forward, move backwards, whatever it might be. Anything else you want to share? I mean, this is 2 hours. I should be charging movie tickets for this type of duration.
I know. It went a little long,
put on a big screen.
Yeah, I mean, it went a little long, but this is a deep book, right? And I think we would do it a disservice if we didn't, because honestly, as much as we've talked about it, you and I, and then you and Levon, there's still 3. There's still 3 dynasties that we haven't touched, right? We haven't touched Knight,
4. Knight, Blood, Avangorian, and isn't there what's it called? It's another one.
Well, there's Virkos, which Levon spoke about, and then but the scary thing is I think totaling in the 2, maybe the 3 interviews, we probably got about 6 hours worth of content, and we haven't even touched 2/3 of the book.
Hopefully people talk about my channel like the Lord of the Rings trilogy. You set it up and you have 3 different videos. But Matt, if people wanted to talk to you more, I know you're incredibly active on my Discord. Are you on Twitter? Are you on the Death Facebook group? Like, where can people talk to you more about this?
I'm in a boatload of Facebook groups. I have a Twitter. I don't think I've posted on my Twitter since 2016, so don't even try me on there. But if you really just want to reach out, I'm on, like I said, I'm on the Discord here. I'm in Soulblight Gravelords competitive group on that on Facebook. I'm in the Night Haunt one. I'm in the Beast of Chaos. I'm in a bunch of them. I have a crap load of armies, as you can potentially see behind me. But I think the easiest would be on your Discord. Yeah.
Any other call out would probably be go check out Seasons of War and subscribe while you're there, because Matt, you have featured on the channel and you've put some of this theory into practice. If you can watch a battle report against Jordan, and I don't know who else you've played, but certainly people could actually see this in action on Seasons of War. So go check out those Canadians.
Specifically the Mannfred list that I had against Jordan Stormcast. If you want to see the use of Mannfred where he's not a hammer as a utility piece, that's the one. It was crazy. So
no, awesome. Any shout outs?
Just a couple. So I mean, being in Ontario, we've got a good group of. There we go. We've got a good group of content creators that are emerging or have emerged. You've already mentioned Season of War, so Jordan, Ridge, Carl, but we've got our Bulldog boys in here, Levon, the Bulldog brothers. But I mean, we've got battle report ones, but we've also got some great content creators. He was in here. I don't know if he's in. He's actually probably streaming now. But Shorty Paint Studios on Twitch. He's a fantastic painter. He's also in your Discord. He happens to be one of my best friends. And then just the group of guys and girls that we've got out here, our local stores are fantastic. Shout out to the Devil's Bench people, Alex, the guy that runs it. He's probably the sole reason why I'm in this game. I don't think he remembers, but years ago I walked in there just to ask him about it, and between him and Shorty, the guy that I was talking about, those two guys got me into the hobby. So I can't thank those guys enough. And then we got Game Night, Crit Hit, the Bunker, Grot Gang guys. There's just a boatload of guys, and I'm sorry if I've missed you, but you're great people. So.
And most importantly as well, if you're watching this as we're recording, Jordan and the Seasons of War crew have actually got a 2-dayer coming up in July. I think it's like the first weekend of July. So if you 100-player event, so I'm sure Matt's going to be there, and I'm sure he'll be accepting grudges and good times. So get out there and go see the Seasons of War. And I'd love to. I looked at tickets, and it was like $3,000 flights. And I'm like,
it might change
22 hours, like 22-hour, 23-hour flight, $3,000. I don't know if I like Warhammer that much.
Yeah, we got, but we've also got Grand Clash coming up. So anybody who's in all around Canada and some guys from the States, hopefully, if you're in here, I'll see you there at the end of April.
Matt, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much. I'd love people to share their comments in the comment section below, what they thought, and more importantly, what are some of the combinations and synergies that we didn't talk about. Like, we didn't talk about Belladama, we didn't talk about Chataka, we didn't talk about, like, there's so much that we really didn't really scratch the surface. So I think I'd be curious to hear more about the list teching that other people are finding from the Soulblight. But again, it's an incredibly deep book, and I can't wait, like the cities, to keep just exploring, because you keep, removing a layer, and then you find everyone talked about Phoenixes first, then we went into Iron Drakes, then people are going into Wanderers, like in Living Cities, and then it'll evolve to something else. So
now Living Cities is back.
Yeah, like it started off with Hello Heart, and then it was like Tempest Eye and Hammer Hall. Now we're into, like it just evolves, and that's exciting.
We just saw the Franken zombie weird thing that might get a war scroll. Probably not, but who knows, right? That one guy might change the game, or he might just be a Necromancer proxy. Who knows?
Well, yeah, maybe maybe if he's good enough, there'll be a show coming up. But Matt, I'll let you go. Thank you so much. I'm going to go watch AEW. Like and subscribe, everyone. Thanks so very much. And Matt, you're a legend.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Take it easy.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.